Shit. Okay. Neil Kiak. See what's happening. Bum, ba, bum, bum. Bum, ba, bum, bum, bum. Oh, yeah, I'm live. Live with no on it. Any questions, please ask. Okay. Oh. I think that's better, but still got this weird flickering thing going on. Flick, 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 flick. What are backgrounds you gotta put in? Bum, 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 bum. Settings. Video. Is it not video? I think background will do it. Backgrounds that I have here. Not great ones. Give us a second. See. I think that's better. The old loading. There you go. Can I bring that down a wee bit, I wonder? Or should just cranky like that? It's so bulky, like. Why can't I just bring it down to what it was? What's this? Auto. Oh, this one. It'd be handy if I could just pull the bloody thing down. What kind of foods did Irish warriors, the Irish Celtic warriors, what kind of food would they have eaten on the field? What kind of food would they have eaten? It depends, really. What era are you talking about? Are you talking about the early medieval period with the old Vikings? Bum, 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 bum. Good evening, Philip. How are you keeping? Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Playing around with the background of this. The backgrounds are terrible. I'd love to be able to pull it. It's not giving me an option to pull the thing down. Because it wouldn't be too bad if I could just pull the thing down. But it keeps taking like center, you know? But even this one, I'd love to pull this way so I can get the bard in there, the Gaelic bard. Boom, boom, boom. The old 16th century urban. So you're thinking camping, because fin cycle, for example, the between because I'm assuming you're talking about cattle raiders. You're not talking about Clee era, the King's War band going between Gallowglass, Ridra, and Kern. But I'm assuming you want to talk about cattle raiders. And if you're talking about cattle raiders, they go between living a nomad life and living in particular key settlements and stuff. And also they kind of have like a kind of to go and get battered and be served by women and stuff. So they go between living. If you're talking about then them living in nature and stuff, the times they have to camp outside and stuff, I would assume they would eat more dry foods, berries, whatever they would pick as well from the countryside. They were like hunters as well, so they would hunt hare, whatever they can get a hold of as well. And what they could pick as well, you know, as I said, berries, nuts, all that sort of stuff. So if that's your vision of an Irish tray, which is the Kern, not the Gallowglass. Now, again, they didn't live out in nature and stuff. They would have spent a good chunk of their time living in their tower houses and stuff as well. So their diet would have been much more richer. That's why they're bigger and bulkier. So they would have spent a lot more time living inside their tower houses and stuff. Although we do have examples of them sieging, you then would have to go into the whole thing of common sense. You know, I don't know if there's anything eaten when they were sieged, but I suppose it would have been just typical of what the English would have eaten as well when they were sieging the enemy and stuff. So I assume once again that they would have gone off, picked berries, lived off the land as well while seeing fire, eating whatever meat they would have taken from the local countryside. Because if they're sieging the enemy, they would have camped up in the village and stuff, and they would have just taken sheep and various other animals around that whole area, sheep and pig and stuff, roasted and cooked up then, because they're Gallowglass. They don't really care about the farmers and stuff in that piece of land that they're sieging and stuff. So I think it depends on the environment, the era that you're talking about, stuff like that. Bum, bum, bum. That's my guesstimation then. Right. I'm a huge fan of that one as well. I'll go find something else that enter. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, bum, bum. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Let me have an old gawk. You get a drink of water in a second. Dun, 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 dun. Is it true Irish war to battle naked to freak his opponent? Yeah, just for you, Jim. Just for you. The Irish word waved their what's called sausage at the old enemy. Wavy. The amount of times I get that every once in a while where I'll randomly bump into someone online and they will start talking about Irish warfare in a very kind of assuming way. Like, they'll be like, well, I assume, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay. Conversation is going to turn into a car crash. It literally, the conversation will just turn into explaining rather than having a conversation. I think it would be true both ways if you were serious trying to pressure the locals. Yeah, I think it depends on the situation and stuff. If you're talking about like what they would have eaten during a siege and stuff, I think it does depend on the situation. For example, like the Fitzgeralds Gallowglass care about the the territories of the Butlers and stuff in Ormond. So I don't think they'd have any problems like burning and trashing and robbing supplies and robbing people and eat all that stuff and sort of land, compared to the likes of the if they went more into O'Brien territory. Weirdly enough, the Fitzgeralds had a better relationship with the O'Briens, so maybe they'd be more hesitant there. Would probably bring their own supplies with the carts and stuff, and freshly made food and bread. Why is there such terrible photos online? Medieval wallpaper. I want to find something decent to put in the background. Let's see what else we have here. I'll try this one out once it loads. Naked and shoot darts and arrows. Yeah, completely naked, throwing their darts and arrows and running away. Sausage waving away like there's no tomorrow. If you were the aggressor, then you would likely spend more time raiding food and shares. After all, you're eating your enemy's food and forcing them to come out to protect. Yeah, I definitely would 100% agree with that one, because you can see that with Norman warfare in the High Middle Ages, when you're talking about the likes of the 12th century for sure, where they're going into the area, they're sieging the fortification, and then they're constantly patrolling around it going, hey, look, your lord can't protect you, your lord can't protect you, and then burning the land around the settlement and eating that food, and sometimes even hanging the locals close to the settlement just to prove that point that that king cannot protect that land. Your YouTube feed is glitching, Philip. I'm just catching. Let's keep it shut. Yeah, I'm getting a lot lately with the internet's kind of dipping and doing its own thing. Why is that such garbage? What is it now? Is it proper glitchy right now? Oh yeah. Yeah, it seems to be still very. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's very bad for the old glitchy, isn't it? In Amma Domino, Bannerlord Mod, they have a bunch of mercenary Hobbler units for hire, one of which are Hobbler horse archers, game balance, or any truth in Irish horse archers. It's in the realm of possibility, but I think darts and javelin men would be far superior. I don't know any sources, to be quite honest with you. Like, it is in the realm of possibility, simply because we do have crossbows and bows and arrows. Bows and arrows in Ireland. And we also, with the Fitzgeralds, have longbowmen in Ireland as well. So it's in the realm of possibility. However, with the Hobblers, especially the Hobblers, would you use the bows and arrows and the crossbowmen when darts and javelins are just better? And also, we have sources from around 1399 of dartmen and javelin men piercing the full plate armor of English knights. So they are quite better at getting the job done compared to the bowmen who fire. It's more difficult for them to fire from the horse, from the hobbler horse. And on top of that, I don't know any sources of them penetrating the armor the way the javelin men and the dart men are penetrating the armor. Like, just popping in. How are you doing? How are you keeping? How is everyone doing? I need to reset my router and computer anyhow. Let me see if you... Right. Who else has questions and stuff with the old Irish medieval history? Also, on top of that as well, I need to get a drink. Hey, boys. We're talking Hobbler. Oh, aye. We're talking the old Hobbler horseman now. Any questions to do with the Hobbler horseman? Or anything else you want to advance on, Ryan? Just 1 second, because my side is starting to split now from a lack of water. Where did I put my old cup? We're just... Yeah, it's dropped down here now as well, to be honest with you. See if I better... My lighting looks better there. Probably looks like complete garbage over here. We're just dipped kind of in and out. Give us a second there and I'll get a drink of water for myself. Ask a question there, will you? On Hobbler horses, probably. Wow. My hot take, my hobby horse never went. Oh, very nice. Boom, boom, boom. I'm back again anyway. She's not as fast on this side as the other side, to be quite honest with you. As in the, what's it called? The connection between the streamed connection I'm using and the other yarn. Did Irish warriors have cavalry and horseback cavalry? When you say Irish warriors, do you mean what was it, Kerns, the cattle raiders, or are you talking about professionals? Like, what's an Irish warrior? Are you talking about the professional men at arms, or are you talking about the cattle raiders? Bum, bum, bum. Did Irish warriors have cavalry, horseback cavalry? If you're talking about Ridra, so I'm assuming you're talking about Ridra, which is Irish knights. Did Irish knights have cavalry? Yeah, the Irish knights had cavalry, all right. Not to the standard of technology as the English knights. The English knights had heavier cavalry going into the 15th century. So they're about standard around the, I'd say, the 13th and 14th century. Ridra Irish knights are about standard to the English and the French. But going into the 15th and 16th century, the Ridra Irish knights, they kind of evolve in their own direction. Ridra armor kind of evolves to be much more lighter. Like, they're still putting on more full plate armor, but it's much more lighter than English armor, and definitely way lighter than continent European armor, the Ridra armor, to be quite honest with you. Actually, I could probably find a photo of a Ridra. Ridra actually wouldn't be a bad idea. Let me see if I can find one for you. The old Ridra, Irish Knight. Or not. Let's see if I can find it here. I can find earlier Ridras of the 13th century, the 13th and 14th century, but I can't find, give us a second there, of Kern and, oh wait, if I type in Anglo-Irish, it normally pops up. Anglo-Irish. Anglo-Irish Knight, maybe? Oh, there he is. Yeah. So if I type it there, and then I go to settings, and then I go to general. Oh yeah, visual. Back then, I could probably change it. Or not. Oh no, I'm inside here this way. Although it'd probably be better if I just open up another window. Let me see. Add source. Image. And then I put him here. If I put him there, will it work? There he is. Whoop, whoop, whoop. We're showing things off now, boys. We're getting places. Or did I just break up completely again? Hobblers are more Anglo-Norman, aren't around very long. The unit evolves into Gaelic. Geez, a lot of... Are we talking Total War, are we? I thought Hobblers were Hobblers. They're more Anglo-Norman. I think the Hobbler horse was in Ireland before the arrival of the Anglo-Normans. Do you have any recommendations for Irish history? Since I'm across the pond and a little goes over my head. It depends. Are we talking about early medieval, high Middle Ages, or late medieval period? Which one are we looking at in particular? Let me see now. Actually, do you know what? I'll go for this one. I'll try this background. Actually, no, I'll pick large 1 second. Large. I'm still playing around with the background and stuff. Give me a second. Bum, bum, bum. All. You want all of it? That's a long time. Because you have, like, what's your favorite? Is your favorite early medieval with the Saints and Scholars, and then you got the Vikings, and then you go from the Vikings into the High Middle Ages with the Ridra and the well, I wouldn't say peasant, kind of clansmen more than peasants. And then you go from like the Ridra and the clansmen to the late medieval period when you've got the Gallowglass and Kern, the retinue and the mercenaries. Bum, bum, bum. And you've got the old tower houses. We're on building a whole load of Irish tower houses. And then 500 years later, people tear down all those tower houses because they're like, well, they're Norman castles. The Gaelic have no ability to build castles. How could they build castles? We have to tear these things down because they're all English. Everything before 1916 is English, so we need to tear them all down. Bum, 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 bum. Oh, this one seems like a nice background. Can't go wrong with an old tree. No, that's from the same book, which you put up as a picture of Kearns and Gallowglass. I can't remember. I know of the Hobbler horse, but I can't remember the Hobbler horse just evolving one day. I know what you're talking about is more people who are trained up. Airy, the nobles who were trained up to be Hobbler horsemen. Because like when you say Hobbler horsemen, you're referring to the what was it called? Oh my God, the Kern the trained up Kern boys who go around the place throwing their javelins. That's what most people mean anyway when they say Hobbler horsemen. They're talking about the cattle raiders, the Kern boys who go around throwing their javelins. And pop over here again. And what do I need to do? Oh yeah, I'm looking to change. I'll see what this background looks like. Click upload, and we'll see about uploading his photo. Or where did I put it? There it is. Let's start uploading now. Let's see what this background looks like. There we go. She's grand. I wouldn't say she's the best now. Vikings in the High Middle Ages. So you're talking about that transition period between, well, kind of the reform of the church era when you're going from like the Viking Age into the High Middle Ages, the era of Murtagh Breen and stuff. Damien Bracken has a great little book on that, but it's more on the reform of the church more than anything else. And there's not much work done on Irish Crusaders and stuff so far, because most of the Irish Crusaders were pretty much like all other Crusader knights of that period of the First Crusade, which is mostly unwanted bastards who were kind of, forced to go and join the Crusades. They were kind of the extra children and stuff. But yeah, it's mostly Damien Bracken's book, The Reform of the Church. Reform of the Church of the 12th century. Ireland. Book. Yeah, that's the one. I did my thesis on Murtagh Breen with Damien Bracken. So if I pop over here, can I change this? Replace? Aha, I can. This is great. And then I can zoom down here and put in Damien Bracken's book. Ha! Voila! We're learning things, guys. We're learning things. We're picking up bits and bobs now. But yeah, that's what you want there. The Irish Church, Its Reform by Damien Bracken. I think it's Damien Bracken? Someone anyway. But yeah, that's pretty much what you need. That's one of them anyway. Where's Damien Bracken's one? Or is there another one? Bam, bam, bam. Bam, 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 bam. Ireland before the Normans. Yeah, this might be a book for you as well. Ireland before the Normans. Bum, 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 bum. Let's see if I can minimize this one. Replace. And then we change the image again. And we put that one there. How's that going to come up? Oh, see, boys, I'm all fancy dancy with my pictures, aren't I? Let me change. Let me see now. I'll pop over to Instagram and see if we can go live on that. Bum, bum. Go over to the home, and then we'll click on create live video, and then we'll give it. Yeah, we'll just call it live medieval. I don't think it really matters. Give it public. And then stream key. And then I'll pick over here, go to edit channels. And then I will, if I click this one, will it work? Click on that one. I don't know if this will work. Okay. Yeah, this one's temperamental with going live on Instagram. I haven't actually yet. Stream key. Update. But I did put in an updated version. What is this on? Ah, gotcha. Okay. Okay, so if I save that one. Was that the right one though? No. Let's try again. Paste. Oh, I don't know. That Instagram is wild. Was the Irish warrior more like a guerrilla type fighter? They were just naked men running around, doing nothing. What's the definition of a Irish warrior? Are you talking about Kearns? Are you talking about Kearns? What era are you talking about? Are you talking about the Gallo Glass? Are you talking about the Kearns, the Gallo Glass? Are you talking about the Clear Airy? Are you talking about the Ridra? Yeah, more like chimps. That's it, like just naked people just hanging off trees, covered in blue pads. That's why the English just kept beating them, They were just like, that's why it took them, what was it, 400 years, because the Irish kept going into the trees, hanging off the trees, like throwing their shy at them and go back into the trees again. That thing is absolutely horrendous. Trying to link this with what was it? Restream, where you just restream everything. Switch back over to this one. What's it like over on this side? This is the complete garbage. You can hear the old airplane go by. I think a book for you would be of Kearns and Gallowglass. Let me have a look. Yes, book. I need to get more books. And I can actually switch back and then I can do this one and replace it again. This is a handy old thing, isn't it? Like, of Kearns and Gallowglass. There you go. All the Irish warriors you want of the late medieval period. Anybody got any more questions? I know Wayne does anyway, especially about the chimp people. The chimp people who live in the trees. What's Wayne following me on? Wayne, what are you on? It says here you're on YouTube, but I can't see your comment. Wayne, your comments are popping up so random. Cashel. What were you saying earlier about the Onocta Cashel? Let's see. Oh, yeah, your comment went by while I was taking a drink, was it? What were you saying about the Onocta of Cashel? Hello. What's the crowd doing? I have Cairns and Gallowglass. Let me see. Karen. Cairns and Gallowglass. Bum, bum, bum. What's this one? The Mighty Fortress of God. What is this book about? YouTube, mate. I'm very random. Aye, aye. When people are saying hi at you, boy, they're trying to buy you a drink. Just like to hear more about the old casual mob. Oh, aye. What were the major mistakes of Robert the Bruce's brother did on his campaign in Ireland? Oh, that's very much a deep dive. A deep dive I haven't got fully into. I think because he got very pinned down in the battle of, what was it, the siege of Carrickfergus, wasn't it, very early on. It really didn't help that they didn't realize that they were going into a climate change. There's that dirty word there. But yeah, there was a climate change going on between a summer era going into a winter era, which Robert the Bruce in Ireland did not know was going to happen. So himself and the O'Neills are sieging Carrickfergus, and they were expecting more of a summer climate going into the summer, and they didn't get it because a little mini ice age started to appear, which has really stumped modern climate studiers. But regardless, it causes a mini ice age to kick off, which really affected Robert the Bruce and kind of really undermined his siege. Plus, I don't think he expected Carrickfergus to last as long as it did. That siege just went on and on and on and on for ages, and really depleted his storage and stuff. He also he was using Carrickfergus walls, his tents and stuff outside of Carrickfergus, as to go and attack the rest of Ireland from, instead of just doing it from inside the walls of Carrickfergus, which is fucking wild, like. And then eventually, when he does take Carrickfergus, that's still trying to, rebuild itself back up again, and he's trying to use it as a main base, while also attacking the rest of Ireland from, So eventually led him to being wiped out by the, I suppose, the Bergs and stuff. What was it? The Bergs? Yeah, it is the Bergs. And the likes of the Fitzgeralds and the Butlers and stuff later on. But even on top, there was so many opportunities just on both sides, just went to absolute hell. Because on the other side of things, you also had Phelim O'Connor, who also declared that he was, re-Éireann at the time as well, King of Ireland. Because he was, technically speaking, he was, re-Éireann of Ireland. And Phelim O'Connor was doing an amazing job beating up the Bergs, because the Bergs were also fighting the Bruces at the same time, because the Bergs were completely overwhelmed, because they had to fight off an invasion by both the Scottish, and they had an insurrection by the Gaelic in Connacht at the same time. So all of his territories were getting overwhelmed at once, and he wasn't getting supported by Edward II, because the Plantagenets at the time didn't trust the Bruces, So he was really fecked from all sides. So he wasn't getting the support he needed from Dublin, because the Plantagenets didn't trust him. And he wasn't, all of his territories were being attacked. The northern territories being attacked by the Bruces, when the full-on invasion. And then his western territories were all under insurrection by Phelim O'Connor. So he was getting buggered each way he was going. But by just sheer luck, Carrickfergus was holding out, giving him enough time and enough breathing space to go and smash out Phelim O'Connor in Connacht. Phelim O'Connor was winning the war, but then Phelim was going to lead his military from the front, which is kind of expected from a Gaelic warlord or a Gaelic king, especially somebody who's claiming to be the warlord of Ireland, the King of Ireland. So Phelim O'Connor decides he's going to be an old-fashioned king and lead from the front. And what happens? He ends up getting killed, just by just a sheer luck. A spear manages to land on his face and kill him, instantly. So the whole campaign goes to hell in Connacht for the Gaelic. And then, obviously, that gives him enough time then to smash out Connacht, take Connacht back under his control. And then because the Bruces, end up being very, very lucky, and their supplies are really depleted downwards. It gives the Bruces enough time to kind of regroup and then go off, kind of center himself politically around the Butlers and the Fitzgeralds, and be able to go over and smash out the what was it, Bruce invasion at the same time, the Scottish invasion, but just sheer luck. Because if Phelim O'Connor modern and acted more like a king from the High Middle Ages, leading from the back, rather than a kind of warlord king from the front, he would have won that battle, I don't know. It just seems like complete madness to me, because if you look at like the likes of Murtagh Breen and the O'Connors early on, just before the Normans were invading, they really had modernized their military up to that point. They had Ridera, Irish Knights. They were using, Gallowglass mercenaries, Gall Gael mercenaries. And they were also using Clí Éirí, as the main kind of force at that point. And they could have just, and at that point as well, they had taken on more Gallowglass mercenaries from the Isles between Scotland and Ireland, and had to replace that Clí Éirí with Gallowglass at that point. So they had like a modern military of the 13th century going into the 14th century. So Phelim O'Connor should have won that war, and then Phelim O'Connor could have taken advantage of the Scottish invasion that the O'Neills had invited in, and then kind of easily subjugated the O'Neills, because the O'Neills had taken the full blunt of the Bruce's campaigns for a good while there. But leading from the front, I think, was an absolute disaster for them. I don't know. I just don't know. What is going on that I can't get that streaming software up and running? I try streaming key, but that's not working. Unless it's just not taking on the full thing. Give us a second there. I'll try that again. We'll play around with this, because it has no problems multi-streaming on Twitch and on, what's it called? Paste that and see if it makes a difference. Might be onto something now. Update your channel and provide a... What does it mean by update the channel? How to stream on Instagram. Did they ever use dogs or wolfhounds in battle? No, I don't know of a single example of wolfhounds on the battlefield. When you think of wolfhounds, how do you think of them? Like what do they do on the battlefield? Who are some of your favorite high kings? High kings. What do you mean by high kings? You mean kings of the High Middle Ages? Or when you say high kings, you mean just the man with the biggest stick, which is more kind of early medieval perspective of kingship, which is the same throughout all of Europe. Like early medieval Europe is pretty much the man with the biggest stick. Because like when people say decentralized Ireland and they're using the term high king, they always talk like it's unique to Ireland. But, this was a case throughout all of Europe, that it was the man with the biggest stick that ruled in the early medieval period. And then you go into the High Middle Ages, and that's where it kind of turns into a car crash. But the only reason it turns into a car crash in Ireland is because of the Norman invasion of Ireland in 1169. So like before 1169, you have that, the O'Connors are very much the Éireann, the kings of Ireland at the time. But then the way the Normans crash in, Strongbow is kind of like the man. He's pretty much the man with the biggest stick, which is the Cambro Normans. But then the English invade in 1171 with Henry II, and he just kind of goes in, smashes everything, and doesn't fix anything. And then he expects King John to go in and fix everything. But King John just, I don't know what that young fella is doing. He's kind of a moron, like. And then he kind of gets the boot out. Hugh de Lacy kind of kicks him out. And then when Hugh de Lacy is kind of centralizing in fixing everything that's happening in Ireland with the administration. He gets assassinated, so it turns into a mess again between, you know, Norman lords, as you would say, and the Gaelic. You know, the closest thing you get again to some form of, you know, the man with the biggest stick is, you know, the O'Neills. The O'Neills at this point are starting to proper pick up. Well, of course, that gets complicated again when you have Brian O'Neill. So you have Brian O'Neill's revolt and the Tamad Wars that kick off around 1260. But that turns into a car crash because of the same thing we were saying earlier about leading from the front. Brian O'Neill leads from the front as well, and he ends up getting chopped up in the Battle of Down. But he's vastly outnumbered as well. Funnily enough, it's rival O'Neills that join up with the kind of Anglo-Irish lords, and they end up beating O'Neill in the Battle of Down. Do you know much about the battle? That one is actually around that bloody one I was talking about. That's the one led by the McCarthys, though, isn't it? Wasn't that a successful ambush more than anything else? That was a successful ambush by the McCarthys. I'm assuming it was on the Fitzgeralds, wasn't it? If I remember right. Because right for the time being, although it's a part of the Brian O'Neill's revolt and the Tamad Wars, and that battle is very important to the Brian O'Neill and the Tamad Wars, isn't that fought like way down south with the McCarthys? And they end up beating back the Fitzgeralds. Let me quickly get that one. Battle of... Here am I talking about the Brian O'Neill and Tamad Wars. Like I know everything about it. Yeah, I was thinking that one, all right, that it was the one, the Brian O'Neill and Tamad Wars. Because like that's pretty much our Scottish War of Independence, is the Brian O'Neill revolt and the Tamad Wars. That's pretty much our version of the Scottish War of Independence. Except for we completely kind of it kind of turns into just a weird disaster that the O'Briens kind of captivate on. Right, the O'Briens kind of take full advantage on and leave Ireland in a kind of strong standing against the kind of Norman Anglo-Irish lords just before entering into the Scottish War of Independence. And then the McCarthys and O'Briens are able to build up going into the Scottish War of Independence against the English again, like. Although it's the O'Connors and the Bruces, the Scottish invasion and the O'Connors, they themselves don't go anywhere again. And once again, it's the O'Briens and the McCarthys take full advantage of that, especially with the Battle of Dyce O'Dea. The Battle of Dyce O'Dea is really something that pulls, continues to kind of get the Irish going from strength to strength to strength to strength. Like, it's once again, the O'Briens and the McCarthys are the ones kind of keeping Ireland together, I think, at that point. The O'Neills were pretty much wrapped up in about every war in Ireland at one time or another. Yeah, they pretty much were. I think it's because, it's Fat O'Neill around the 1240s, 1250s. Like, he successfully really beats down the MacLachlan's. So the MacLachlan's are kind of just before the arrival of the Normans into Ireland. The MacLachlan's are battered in the civil war between the O'Connors. So the O'Connors and the MacLachlan's are fighting over the kingship of Ireland. And the O'Connors win that war, but they're kind of still weakened. And then suddenly you get the Norman invasion of Ireland. And then you get the English invasion in 1171 by Henry II. The Anglo-Norman invasion. And that weakens, although technically it should be the Anjou Empire invasion, because Henry II also owned the majority of fucking France at that stage. I say feckin' as in dirt. I didn't say the other word. Go McCarthy's, go. But anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, the MacLachlan's are the ones who were dominant before the Norman invasion of Ireland. And they see themselves as the successors of the O'Neills at that point. But they lost the civil war against the O'Connors. But Ireland is kind of left weak after that civil war, and it allows the Norman invasion to happen, and the Normans are able to quickly take advantage of what was going on. And with that, you also have the O'Neills. The O'Neills are able to take advantage of that entire situation and start carving out a whole load of land. And of course, there's no better way to declare that, you know, you're the successes of the O'Neill than calling yourself O'Neill, you know, and then start taking over as much land as possible, because they kind of just appear and start gobbling up from them. Yeah, it's great stuff, I tell you that. Might as well get a map of medieval. If we're sticking around 1250, might as well actually get a map from 1250. Oh yeah, Total War, Medieval 2. I find their map is actually one of the best ones. See if I can actually find. There we go. I don't know how this is going to come out on the computer. Replace. Boom. See how this. There we go. Yeah, you can see how England has quickly snatched up Leinster, and then they've gobbled up the Ullid territories as well up in the north. That's the, what was it? The Burghs. The Burghs go over, and they it was, what's his name? Oh, the Cogans, wasn't it? It was the Cogans are down south. Who is it again? Was it DeLacy? Hugh DeLacy. Hugh DeLacy. Yeah. The Prince of Ulster. No, it says Lord of Meath. I'm mixed up the other one. Give me a second. Prince of Ulster. I got Hugh O'Neill. John de Courcy. That's the Prince of Ulster. So yeah, John de Courcy at the start of the Norman invasion of Ireland quickly goes over and takes over the Ullid territory. He kicks the Ullid out and he declares himself Prince of Ulster. And he starts fighting with the likes of the O'Neills and the O'Donnells and the MacLuchlans. And who was it? It was King John. Is it King John that wasn't so impressed about this? And he marches up north and he boots out John de Courcy out of that whole area. And then he puts the Burghs in their place instead. And then the Burghs go to war with the O'Neills, the MacLuchlans, and the O'Donnells. And the O'Neills and MacLuchlans are already at war because the O'Neills are looking to become the successors of the O'Neills, and then from there become the rightful kings of Ireland, the re-Éireann. Diarmaid MacMurrough has a lot to answer for. Ooh, let's open up those can of beans. You see, these are the can of beans I like to open. I don't like when people come on and start yapping on about modern stuff. I'm just like, oof. Diarmaid MacMurrough. Yeah, Diarmaid MacMurrough is the real problem causer. He makes no sense to me, I'll be quite honest with you, Paul, because he pretty much left all of his male heirs to be executed by the O'Connors, and he's left with no male heirs because he committed treason. Because I know a lot of people, when you say, oh, Diarmaid MacMurrough, he didn't commit treason because he had no understanding of modern nationalism. But he still committed treason within his own Tuat, in my opinion, his own tribe, because of the fact he gave up his sons as hostages to the O'Connors after the civil war between the MacLuchlans. And so when he went over to England to get mercenaries to then continue the civil war against, which now had become a full-on invasion against the O'Connors, he then committed treason, going against his contract with the O'Connors. And so he allowed his sons to be executed by the O'Connors, you know? So in my opinion, I still see Diarmaid MacMurrough as not a traitor from a nationalist perspective, because he had no idea what modern Irish nationalism, but he was a traitor from the perspective of against his own to it because he signed a contract which whole, be a subjugated vassal to the. Now, I know the counter argument to that is the fact that, well, the O'Rourke's were looking to usurp his territory and take that anyway, because the O'Rourke's were on the winning side and on the side of, what's his face, the O'Connors were on the side of the O'Connors during the Civil War, compared to the MacMurroghs, who were on the side of MacLauchlan's, on the losing side. And so it could have been a case of the MacMurroghs were terrified, especially Diarmaid MacMurrough, was terrified that the O'Rourke's were literally about to take up all their territories. So he seen himself in a lose-lose situation. But the moment he went over and took on the Normans as mercenaries, he's then in a situation where his son was going to get executed anyway. Yeah. The Pope, what do you mean by or the Pope? I don't mind conversations of the Pope. Oh, sorry, actually, I missed your, Davey, I actually missed that one, sorry. Random, do you think the Gaelic lords were right to leave Ireland after the 9-Year War? I was talking to my supervisor back in 2018 when I was doing my thesis on Murtagh I Breen, King of Ireland, back in around 1103. But he was talking about the 9-Year War, which is technically speaking out of my field of expertise, but I'm still covering it as part of medieval history. But he was saying, Dr. Damien Bracken was saying that Hugh O'Neill shouldn't have left Ireland, that he should have stayed in Ireland. But I don't know what happened between the king of, who was now king of England at the time, and Hugh O'Neill, because during the 9-Year War, the Stuarts and the O'Neills were insanely close. They were super, super, super close. Then when the Stuarts took the kingship of England, who previously was the King of Scotland, by the way, everyone seems to forget this, that the Scots took over England. It was not the other way around. Everybody imagines England took over Scotland. No, they didn't. The Scottish took over England after the 9-Year War, which is hilarious because everyone looks at the 9-Year War as a Irish defeat, but it's questionable because the overall goal was still achieved. Elizabeth had died of old age, but you can recounter that again because of the fact of O'Neill he didn't realize that when negotiations were happening, Hugh O'Neill didn't know that Elizabeth was dead. So, the English nobles kind of conned them. But at the same time, the ultimate goal was achieved. Elizabeth was dead. She died of old age. And James Stuart was now King of England, which Hugh O'Neill his biggest ally was the Stuart, at the time. So I don't know what happened after falling out happened after the failed assassination with Guy Fawkes. And you're really out of the field of expertise at that point because you're solidly out of the medieval period and you're solidly in the early modern period at that. So I'm probably the worst qualified for this conversation, but nobody knows what conversation James Stuart and Hugh O'Neill had behind closed doors to suddenly see the flight of the Earls. But the flight of the Earls was not connected to the 9 Years' War, Jim O'Neill kind of highlights that in his book on the 9 Years' War. Actually, I'll take that up now because that's definitely a book you really need to read to update yourself on the actual facts to do with the 9 Years' War. I have this book here. There he is. I have this book at home. I managed to get this before I moved over to Japan. And then when I was in Japan, then all these new books started coming out. So I haven't actually got any physical copies of a lot of these new books. But yeah, you really need to get this book here. The 9 Years' War, 1593 to 1603, right? This is the book to grab. And in this, not only does it explain actual Irish warfare, not Tudor propaganda. Tudor propaganda makes out, hey, look, these guys are savage, these guys are stupid. The 9 Years' War highlights the fact that the Irish had a much more advanced military than the English. Whoa, what? Yeah, I said it there. The Irish in the 9 Years' War started off with a much more advanced military than the English military. The English military was really lagging behind at that point going into the start of the 9 Years' War. Don't get me wrong. The English quickly catch up to the Irish. And the reason why the Irish at the start of the 9 Years' War had a much more advanced military is because they were allied to the Stuarts, who had the Scottish Renaissance. So their military was completely up to date. And also their second biggest ally was the Holy Roman Empire. So the Holy Roman Empire was chucking massive amount of equipment, training, everything, just squarely at Hugh O'Neill. So Hugh O'Neill had a very, very, very advanced military, going into that war and stuff. Compared to the English were kind of surrounded and cut off from all sides. So they themselves had to quickly catch up with the Irish, So it's weird, very weird thing in 1593. The fact that the Irish were at a very strong stance against the English, like very, very weird situation. Not a situation you mostly see. Most of the time, the English are coming into Ireland with a much more advanced military force, but depends on the situation, Pope's blessing from Henry II. Planned invasion of Ireland, granting him authority to take. Yeah, it did. To reform the Irish Church. And you see, this is so funny because the Irish Church was already reformed in 1158. So in 1158, the Ireland had already completed. So it started its reform of the church, I say around 1030. So in 1030, the reform of the church starts. And it finishes its reforms by 1158, officially in 1158, right? With the synod. But then you had an English pope that takes over, and he acts like Ireland was never reformed, and he's preaching all this propaganda left, right, and center, and he's completely ignoring everything that happens. What an absolute madman! He's not even favored by the Italians. Completely can't stand this absolute lunatic, but he gives paperwork to the English, Henry II, that basically ignores the fact that there's any form of a reform that ever happened in Ireland, and therefore granting Henry II the power to invade Ireland, to reform the church, which he does when he has the Synod of Cashel in around 1175. So in 1175, he has the Synod of Cashel, which officially ends the war between Ireland and England. So in 1175, the war between Ireland and England officially ends with the Synod of Cashel. So I suppose popes just make up stuff as they go along. But that's what the UN does today, doesn't it? Just makes up stuff as go along. Let me go through these questions. Bum, bum, bum. The Irish were winning up to Kinsale. They were. They won every single battle up to Kinsale. But then the English had modernized and everything, and they had caught up because they were starting to take Ireland really, really, really serious, because both the Scottish and the Holy Roman Empire were using Ireland as a proxy to attack England. And if Hugh O'Neill had completed his campaigns in Ireland and Elizabeth hadn't passed away at that point, then Ireland would have just gone back to doing what Ireland always does and start invading into York, because in the entirety of the early medieval period, Ireland would invade and reinvade York and take over York, and then use it as a trading hub into Scandinavia, and then connect the trading hubs of York, Dublin, and then connect that into France, and then into Iberia, and then from Iberia into the Mediterranean Sea. So I think the English were fed, and you can see that with the end of the late medieval period as well, with the invasions during the Wars of the Roses. But I'm literally talking hypothetically here, but you would have definitely seen invasions into England if Hugh O'Neill had captured, like actually not just captured it in a sense of just tribute, because you can see the Black Rent coming in during the late medieval period after the Gaelic resurgence. But I'm talking about like if he physically took Dublin, then he definitely would have been in a position of then, just like the Fitzgeralds were at the end of the Wars of the Roses, then start invading back into England again, you know? And I think the, what's it called? The English were definitely terrified of that. Not only losing Dublin, but then using Ireland as a base to do those invasions into was England. Even today, you know, you could see that slight fear of different nations using Ireland as a proxy to invade into England and liberate York once and for all, the north of England. Because there's so many Yorkists that even today would rather be governed by Dublin perhaps than London, you know? But I don't know. Bum, bum, bum. Where are we now with the questions? Right on. Oh, you're more than welcome, Jim O'Neill. Yes, they should have stayed in Ulster, but Spanish landed in the wrong area. Yeah, it's kind of on my field of expertise because with those armadas and stuff, they kept crashing. That Irish shore, it's grand for Irish ships because the Irish ships were adjusted from the Viking ships, the longboats and stuff. So it was grand for the Irish to sail around as quick as they could around the coastal area of Ireland. But those Spanish ships were not designed to be flying around the coastal area of Ireland, and they kept crashing. So it was very, very, very difficult for them to land to even start with. So I think that's why they went with Cashel and tried to stick with Cashel. But you're right, Hugh O'Neill trying to move all the way down there, especially when he was dealing with the politics of the Old English. So he was put in a very, very difficult position, to be honest with you. There was the Celtic Church. Maybe Rome just wanted more power. But the Celtic Church was gone. I know they make the claim that the Celtic Church, the pagan church from the English Pope's perspective, was still there. But the English church was slowly disappearing from around 1030 under Sitric Silkenbeard. So from the period of around 1030 under Sitric Silkenbeard, who was King of Dublin at the time, which would have been, you know, the equivalent of an Earl of Dublin. So he would have been like Earl of Dublin at the time under, what's his name? Donnacha O'Brien. Sorry, Donnacha MacBrien. He was King of Ireland at the time, well, High King of Ireland at the time. And Sitric Silkenbeard was sort of, you know, King of Dublin, but the equivalent of like an Earl of Dublin, a Jarl of Dublin at the time. And Sitric Silkenbeard returned from Rome and he starts the reform of the church. Now, he starts it so he can be like independent from the rest of Ireland. He's got his own political agenda, don't get me wrong. But he does start the reforms. The reforms start coming in there because then Armagh is like, oh, geez, you know, we better pull Christchurch back in again. And there's an entire, you know, this and that between Canterbury because Sitric Silkenbeard was trying to connect Dublin and Christchurch with Canterbury at the time. So he could be independent from Armagh and do what he wanted. And Armagh was like, what are you doing? You know, you're under the laws of St. Patrick. You're supposed to be under us. So Armagh starts to cop itself on and starts reforming the church as well. So yeah, I understand what you're saying by the Celtic Church and everything, but the Celtic Church had pretty much, you know, disappeared, especially by the time you get up to 1158. So by 1158, Ireland is solidly under Rome, you know. It's broken into its 4 provinces of the church. And those 4 provinces of the church are then under Rome. So they're solidly under Rome by 1158, you know. But the English Pope ignores all this stuff. And he pretends and pretty much role plays that Ireland is still under, you know, if you want to refer to as the Insular Church or the Celtic Church. Regardless, it doesn't matter because both of those terms are modern terms. But the papacy wanted to pretend it was still kind of pagan, still kind of folklorish, but it wasn't. Like by 1158, officially, it was under the Roman Church. He's just doing that to justify an English invasion. That's why he's up down. We all know that. And where are we? Yes, they should have stayed in Ulster. Bloody Spanish. It was the Gaelic monk who turned some Saxon king Christian. Yeah, you get that very, very early on with the Golden Age of Ireland around the 8th century. Is it 8th century? I think probably the 7th century. The 7th century. you have a whole load of saints going from Iona, just between Scotland and Ireland. They drop down from Iona into Northumberland, and then they start converting those Anglo-Saxon kings, the kings of Northumberland, as they are referred to in the sources. So the kings of Northumberland, the Anglo-Saxon kings, are converted to Celtic Christianity, if you want to call it Celtic Christianity. I don't mind if you guys call it Celtic Christianity or insular Christianity, but yeah, you're bang on right. They do convert them over to more of the Irish interpretation of the Bible. The Vikings done the same thing. Oh, what was that? Vikings. What did the Vikings do? Funny enough, it was only the English Pope. Yeah. That's my point as well. Like, what were they up to with that one? Like, what's the topic? Any old thing. I think we're talking about the reform of the church right now, which led to the invasions. But we've been going between that one and the 9 Years' War. Bum, bum, bum. I'm going to go forward here because we're kind of jumping around the place with the old chat. Chitty chat chat. I can see your chats on Twitch as well. Bum, bum. I only just jumped in there, so if you have any questions to Irish medieval history, I'm kind of going between YouTube and Twitch right now. I was trying to connect Instagram on, but Instagram's been an old cranky one and won't connect on. What happened 10 years ago? They did. So during the early medieval period, you have the Gaelic around the late 7th century. The men of the Eenale Confederation invade to take over Northumberland, and they fail. And it's one of the bloodiest battles in British and Irish history. And it's just a big, massive bloodbath. I think it's like 10,000 against 10,000. And it's not the only one. There's actually a few massive battles happen because in response, the Anglo-Saxons also invade Ireland, and they also have a massive battle. And the reason why that one also turns into a huge bloodbath. So the first one is an invasion by the Eenale Confederation. And according to sources, it was 10,000 men against 10,000 men. So the Eenale had a massive force. And so when the Eenale invade into England, the English freak out and they raise another humongous, massive force as well. And so in response, the Anglo-Saxons invade Ireland. And when the they're allied by the Ullid. So the men of Ullid join the Anglo-Saxons in the invasion because the Anglo-Saxons are invading to support the men of Ullid. But they're probably going to invade to take over Britain. So the men of Ireland, even if they're fighting amongst themselves, so the Eenale are fighting Munster, for example, they're all freaking out when the Anglo-Saxons are invading. So you have like men all the way from like Kerry at the very bottom of Ireland. So if I switch photos there, boom, boom, boom. Actually, I'll go back to a better photo. Map of Ireland. Yeah, this might be a better photo actually because it's easy. This one's actually from the Viking Age, so it covers the Viking Age of Ireland as well. But you have men from the very bottom of Ireland that the Anglo-Saxons are invading. The men of Britain are invading Ireland. So you have men from the very bottom of Ireland there. If you look at the blue there, men from the very bottom of that, hearing that the Saxons are invading Ireland, so might literally run. They set up their war bands. So war bands from all over Ireland hear about the Anglo-Saxon invasion, and they all just run up to the top of Ireland, and they end up having one of the bloodiest battles in Irish and British history, which is like 10,000 against 10,000 men as well. They're two of them big, massive battles, and it's because the reason why they're so huge is because they escalate into Ireland invading England, was it Britain, and Britain invading Ireland. You know, there is reasons and a lot of stuff happening behind it, but when you get like 10,000 men and you're suddenly invading into Britain, then the British are like, whoa, Jesus Christ, holy hell, what's going on here? You guys can't invade here. So they all raise up their, war bands, and they all race up to that part of England where all this is happening. And vice versa. When the Anglo-Saxons invade into Ireland, they're also freaking out as well. So you have like the men of, in the literature, you have the men of Connacht and the men of Munster who suddenly like freaking out that the Anglo-Saxons are invading. Now, the Anglo-Saxons are invading because they want to help out the men of Ullid up in the top of Ireland. Like there's a king of our Ireland, he gets a bee sting in his eye, and to get mercenaries, and he gets mercenaries because like pretty much everyone in the Anglo-Saxon warband territory want to join his war bands and stuff. So he goes to Northumberland, which at the time, technically speaking, gets all these alleged quote unquote mercenaries over, which ends up being a good chunk of the Britons and the Anglo-Saxons and the Picts. Like they all come in, and then it turns into this big massive battle on both sides, like just a big massive shield wall on shield wall battle, just completely escalates out of hand. That's the romance of it. Anyway, if it happened like that in real life, I'd like to imagine it did, because it sounds brilliant. Just a question there off Irish Breakfast. Was the Celtic Church under the Pope, even though there was, you see, this is where it does get very, very funny, right? Because you have, what happened, you see, at the start of, okay, to make sense of this, we need to go back. What's happened at the very start, when St. Patrick goes over to Ireland, he does that during the Dark Ages. So when he's spreading Christianity, he's spreading, quote unquote, the Roman Christian faith. Like he's spreading the Bible. But the problem is that the Roman Empire has collapsed. So there's no one to kind of tell the Irish, this is how you're meant to understand the Bible. One like above it, this is the verse in the Bible. This is the correct interpretation. Go off of that. What happens is that the Irish have their own of their interpretation of what this information is, but at the same time, a lot of this information did come by from the original Romans, But the problem is that these interpretations, according to Rome, change over time, and this is why later on we end up having branches of Christianity and arguments, between the Roman Christian. But regardless, the Celtic, by the way, Celtic Christianity or insular Christianity, depending on whatever you want to call it, those two terms are modern terms. The Irish in Ireland are confused at this point, because the Irish in Ireland have the book, they have the Bible, reading this stuff. And so when the Roman Christians are coming and into Britain, and they're turning around saying, what the hell are you guys saying? That's not the correct interpretation. When they're saying this to the Irish in Ireland, they're confused, because they're like, but like, this is in the Bible, this is what the Romans said, the Romans of the 5th century. They said that this is the interpretation. That's what they're kind of somewhat sticking to. But at the same time, even monastic settlements inside of Ireland have their own arguments and disputes amongst themselves. So even each monastic settlement from Clonmacnoise, Armagh, Iona, they themselves have their own interpretation of the Bible. So it's complicated. And so what happens is they end up having the Synod of Whitby, where they finally have a meeting to see which interpretation of the Bible is the correct interpretation. And that's the interpretation that the Anglo-Saxons, the Northumberlands, that's what they're sticking to. And so, and by the way, by this point, the men of Munster, the blue part there, they don't disagree with Rome. When Rome comes in, Roman Christians come in, they fully straight away agree with everything what Rome is saying. So this is only a Northern Ireland problem. It's only the Enel who are turning on and saying, oh, wait, no, come on. Like the Romans back in the 5th century said the interpretation is A, B, and C, And now Rome is sending these fresh Christians in, and they're saying, that it's not. It's actually D and F. And so Munster agrees with, the interpretation as D and F. But the men up in that orange part there that you see up in the north, they want to stick to the old version. And that's where you get this kind of Celtic Christianity, and that's why historians say Celtic Christianity and stuff, right? So you end up having that big meeting of the Synod of Whitby. And in that Synod of Whitby, Northumberland agrees with Rome. It says Rome is correct. And it's at that point that the Enel, the lads up in the north, they start to slowly but surely switch over to the Roman Christianity. So all their monastic settlements and stuff start to switch over. And on top of that as well, they really start to centralize around Armagh. And the thing is you still have areas like Iona, for example, that want to kind of keep to the decentralization. And then you go into the Viking Age, and then you have all the fighting and stuff that happens there, right? And it's not until after the Viking Age that finally you have the reforms that start to come in. Because it's not just like Ireland isn't unique. This is happening actually throughout all of Europe, where you had earlier versions of Christianity that went out, and now you've got Rome that's turning around to say, actually, you're all heretics, you're all heathens. You need to listen directly to what the Pope, is saying right now. And that leads to the Gregorian reform of the church that happens around the 11th and 12th, the 11th century, just before the Crusades happen. So just before the Crusades, they have the Gregorian reforms of the church, where the church basically tries to not just reform Ireland, all of Europe. So this isn't just an Irish problem, it's all of Europe. But Ireland sticks to those reforms, those Gregorian reforms. Ireland sticks to them. And it's fully reformed by the time you get up to around 1158. So it starts its reforming around those reforms of the High Middle Ages. They start them around 1158, and they go throughout all of, what was it called? Yeah, so they start from around 1030, and they finish those reforms around officially 1158. And Rome knows this, by the way. It's not a secret like that. The Irish just doing this behind the closet, like. So I don't know what the English Pope was on, and I don't even know why he was allowed to get away with that, My dad had a dozen books that belonged to his mom and dad. I'll have to see if I can find them. I was very young. Can you send them on to me, please? I'd love to have a read myself, never mind you. And what else do we have here? What were the O'Connors doing during the 9 Years' War? Seems like the O'Connors, I don't know. A person to definitely ask that one is Jim O'Neill. Or, even better still, I have Owen O'Neill. Owen O'Neill is definitely the one that asked there, Dr. Owen O'Neill. He's the boy to ask with that one, what the O'Connors are doing. But it depends what branch of the O'Connors you're talking about as well, because you're not dealing with a centralized O'Connors like you would have seen in the High Middle Ages. Because I think after the death of Phelim O'Connor, well, there's already branches of the O'Connors anyway, but when you say O'Connors in the early medieval period and the high medieval period, you're talking about like the kingship of the O'Connors, the ones that dominate in Connacht. But after Phelim O'Connor dies, that's the end of kind of any kind of centralized O'Connors. And then you've got like dozens of branches of O'Connors left, right, and center. Although you kind of like already had septs of O'Connors even before that anyway, And I'm not religious, but I believe Christian groups were pretty much the same in terms of belief. Only mainly dates and certain things like, yeah, but God, did it start arguments? Like that's a very good example, because you do have an argument between the date that you celebrate Easter and in the Celtic Church and the date you celebrate Easter in the Roman Church. They recently they wanted to know which one was actually right, and it ends up there was a bunch of Christians. See, this argument started because the Christians in Iona had dated Easter to one date, and then there was a church in Alexandria in Egypt that dated it as well, and Rome had taken on the date in Alexandria in Egypt because they seen them as more civilized, more intelligent people, So it became a case of, look, shut up, you barbarian idiot over there, So there was a bit of a divide there, because you had people in Iona that were like, but we're right. And they recently they compared which one was actually right in real life. And it ended up, it was Iona. Iona had gone closer to it. It wasn't from what I remember, it wasn't perfect from what I remember, but it was the closest one to it. Bum, bum, bum. The Anglo-Saxons are the English. Well, sort of. The English don't really appear until about the 15th century. Yeah, about the 15th century. That's where you get like the English, kind of like between the 13th and 15th century. It depends what kind of conversation you're having. But yeah, in this conversation, the Anglo-Saxons are the English, just to simplify it. Yeah, mate, the Anglo-Saxons are English. Bye. My understanding is the Pope was trying to unite along the Catholics because the Celtic Church had different local customs. Yeah, and that was the case throughout all of Europe as well. It wasn't just Ireland. A lot of Europe kind of stuck to that. And then after the reforms, well, first off, the English Pope was pretending that Ireland didn't have a reform and it hadn't finished its reform in 1158 because officially, and the church is fully aware of this, the Roman church is fully aware that Ireland had fully centralized and was under Rome by 1158. So I don't know, but there are members of Christ Church in Dublin and various other members of Cashel and stuff that did support the reforms of 1175 by the English, because what happened was that the Irish kings in Ireland, well, the Irish earls, the Irish barons, the Irish lords, had connected themselves too much with the monastic settlements, as in like they pretty much dominated it like a mafia or something. Like they were only putting in place members of their family and stuff, and so other members of the clergy didn't like this. So there were members of the clergy that did support the Norman invasion, and that was simply to kind of get rid of this kind of mafia style of governing with the monastic settlements that these Irish clans were doing in monastic settlements, because the Irish clans were pretty much running it, as in they were putting in place their own clergy. And then on top of that, then they were kind of running what kind of canon laws were happening and stuff. And they were kind of, these monastic settlements weren't enforcing canon laws. They were kind of doing their own thing, which they were in fairness doing. So you do have members of the clergy, from my interpretation of literature, were doing that, What else do I have? Don't quote me, but something like the Roman Church believed unbaptized babies what die go to hell, but the Catholic Church said it was dumb. So yeah, you could be right with one of the interpretations. I think that's Church in Kildare could have believed in that kind of stuff about purgatory not existing, but purgatory, going into the high medieval period, purgatory was a new thing. Like it wasn't even in the Bible. So that I think that's a very, very good example of that, of purgatory not existing. Which is mad. I don't think it was good for the psyche of the Irish. I remember my grandmother thought one of her children died before he was baptized, and it really did. Both my grandmothers on my mother's side and my father's side, they had children that passed away before they were baptized, and it really messed up their mental mind. It really shook them up. They're dear that their children, their unbaptized children, didn't make it to heaven, that they were running around purgatory, really, really messed them up. So those kind of teachings aren't really healthy. Remember hearing something like that. Yeah. But purgatory is not in the Bible, So, and now I think Rome is even, a lot of the time when you talk about purgatory with a lot of the new church and stuff, they kind of ignore that it even existed to start with, So, yeah, the whole teachings of purgatory. That's why a lot of Protestants and Presbyterians and stuff left the church, wasn't it? Because of this mad belief of purgatory. Hey mate, I really love your stream. Enjoy being part of your fun community. Would you mind adding me? Could do at some stage. I'm on Discord right now, but I could do later on. Although I don't know if you're a bot or not. Talk about this one here. I'm not sure if that's a bot or not. Hey mate, I really love your stream. Enjoy being, yeah. I think that's a bot. I am Catholic. Yeah, I'm Roman Catholic as well, but Some of this stuff is mad over the years. And that's why another thing as well is that these popes, how they always link themselves to the Peter. Because even the last pope, that last pope there, he did a lot of stuff that I really, really do question. I think this pope is amazing. The new pope now, I think he's very, 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 very good. But that last pope, he did a lot of stuff that I do question. Like, religious ideas caused away many problems. Imagine how different it would have been in Ireland without Christianity. Yeah, if only they converted to Islam, huh? And would have gotten that support from the Iberian Peninsula. The English Pope. Are you talking about Pope? Yes, I am actually. I looked him up. I've never heard of him. Yeah. Definitely worth reading up to. Very, 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 very interesting person. Even his relationship with the Italians is quite funny. Like, Philip, if I find these books, I don't know if I'll send them on to you. No, it's grand. No, I was only joking in a way. But I will definitely send you the names of them. Yeah, definitely do. That makes a lot of sense. I hope I say what I'm saying makes sense. And hopefully it's historically accurate, because I'm kind of like quoting from my brain. Unbaptized babies go to limbo, not purgatory. Is that limbo now? But is right as of right now, is the Roman Catholic Church still preaching about limbo and purgatory? Do you know? Because they're both like, I don't think limbo and purgatory is mentioned in the actual Bible. And I think even right now, it's still causing a lot of problems, you know? I wouldn't be preaching about limbo and purgatory, especially when, in death, you have that moment with God, which is being preached, by the way. Last time I was talking with the church, with members of the church, to do with, self-deletion, as in lads, kind of, because I have a lot of friends that in 2008, but when I was talking to them about that, they were preaching about the fact that they may not instantly, drop down below. That in fact, you do not know what happens to people in that moment with God before you pass on. And that's what the Roman Catholic Church was preaching last time I was chatting away to them, So, it's God who makes up the rules ultimately. Bum, 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 bum. Do you think Emperor and the Pope had... That was something I always like. This question here is a deep one, and it was definitely something I was looking into before. It could do. I think Ireland was on the side of whatever the Lordship of Ireland was going for at the time, because I think they were involved with the 100 Years' War, but don't quote me on that stuff. It was something that did pop up on my radar before, but I never really got deep into, inquired deep into it. So I don't know. And until I read deeper into it, and that is a deep read, that's not even a level of, just go and ask it academic. That's something you'd have to individually go and do project work from, because how do you even justify getting a grant, to go and buy all those books and stuff? You'd have to, like, with your own money, do it in your own time, research all that stuff. You have a great, thank you so much. That does mean a lot to me. I just noticed. Do you also stream on Twitch? Yeah, I'm streaming on Twitch right now. I think it's just getting bots right now, to be honest with you. I have a picture of baptism in priest and just sprinkled water from his fingers on his forehead. 1 second there. Can you, if you're still on there, can you elaborate on that one there? Because that's 1274, and that's way after the reforms of the church. Do you know? I have to look into that one. The reform of the church. Let me see that one actually. Do you know what? I might as well actually look that up. Here, 1 second actually. I'll see what other questions are here, and then I'll look deeper into that one. Do not believe in leprechauns. Leprechauns. The old fairy folk. The fairy folk evolved from the Tuatha De Danann, the old Irish gods. So the leprechauns are an evolution of the fairy folk in Ireland. That's why I still sort of use kind of insular Christianity at times, especially when you're dealing with the fairy folk within Christianity and stuff, you know. But Ireland, once again, isn't unique in that. That's how you have for the rest of Europe, like, for example, the German states of the Holy Roman Empire and Poland, they also have their like folklore Christianity as well. So folklore Christianity is a person's interpretation, you know, a peasant's interpretation of Christianity. So sometimes when you're having a conversation, to simplify it, you refer it to as kind of local folklore Christianity. So instead of it being Rome's dominant version of Christianity, which the priests and the educated class would preach, you have a peasant who has his view of the world. And so when you're, as a historian, when you find a bit of information and you know that bit of information came from somebody who wasn't educated, you mostly put it in the classification of kind of local Christianity or folklore Christianity. And so leprechauns kind of fall into that kind of category of kind of folklore Christianity. But in the medieval sources and stuff, they would be referred to as kind of the fairy folk more than leprechauns. But they're not unique to, you know, folklore Christianity is not, or local Christianity isn't unique to Ireland. You see that throughout all of Europe. And in Poland and in the German states, it's very, very, very interesting, because then you see the evolution of witches, because witches, once again, are not in Christianity. You know, as many people are saying here, like Ireland with the Ellis Kettler thing, that's unique, okay? But for a lot of Europe, they don't burn women. They burn women for heresy. They don't burn women for witchcraft until you get to the 17th century. And then clean cut in the 17th century, you get women burned for witchcraft and not heresy. Because witchcraft is something, you know, local Christians and folklorists believe, not the actual church, not the Roman church. And even on top of that, even educated people and Roman Christians, as in priests and stuff, sometimes they get these folklore beliefs in their head as well, and they start preaching this folklore stuff, although it has nothing to do with actual solid Roman teachings inside of Rome, you know. And you can see that with the preaching of witches, you know. That's not a, like, the Pope highlights that again and again and again and again. Even today, witches are not in the Bible. It is a folklore belief. Bum, bum, bum. If you understand what I'm saying, probably just waffling shite. I don't think so. Changing to part Islam now. Well, you know, you wouldn't really have to worry about it. But this is funny, because at the same time, in about the 12th century with the Norman invasion of Ireland, when I was saying, actually, why didn't we just switch over to Islam? If they were going to invade, call us a bunch of heretics anyway, say we were Celtic Christians and not Roman Christians. Should we have? We might as well have just, you know, joined Islam and ally ourselves with the Iberian Peninsula, which is modern day Spain and Portugal, you know, at that stage, you know. But it was kind of a running team I was doing for the crack. I know why we didn't convert to Roman Christianity, but it's something I just find funny playing with the idea, especially when England was doing the same thing, because Henry II at one point, he gets into an argument with the Roman Church as well. And he threatens, like full on threatens, to convert to Islam, to wreck up the church, you know, to, you know, as an FU to the church at the time. Oh, you're completely surrounded by heretics. Them telling you you're going off I think that's hilarious. You know, I don't want to sound bad, but unless you actually are protesting against the Roman Church, I find a lot of that stuff is just full on heresy. Like, I listen to, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't say that to Church of England or to Presbyterians in Ireland. But when I listen to a lot of branches that have completely broken off from the Roman Church inside of America, they're just preaching full on heresy. There's no protest against the Roman Church. Like, I do wonder if alleged Jesus came down from the sky now and says, okay, guys, come on, snap, snap. We're all going back into the Roman Church. There was a few mistakes. I'm here to clear this all now. Come on, Jews. Come on, Islam. You're all welcome in. Come on. I'm going to fix all these problems. Well, what's these American branches going to do, you know? Because they've been going off preaching all kinds of things in the corner, you know? No, Wayne, sorry to say this, but if Jesus comes down, how are you going to turn around to Jesus there and hey, look, no, sorry, buddy, look, I know there's a few mistakes with the Bible and stuff, and a few, what was it? What's the word I'm looking for? But regardless, look, I'm still Wayne. I think you're going to switch over to Christianity quick. If Jesus suddenly just started coming down from the sky, wants to fix everything, you know. Bum, bum, bum. They hang their hat. That Jim, they don't believe in the Virgin Mary. Wayne. Bum, bum, bum. Yeah, like, it's just something that pops up in 1274, and it's just been a funny subject since 1274 by the looks of it. But I need to actually read down. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not turning around to saying I'm a saint. Like, I do need to actually sit down and read the laws and stuff that were put in place in 1274 about purgatory. I think that would be an exciting read to do. The Second Council in 1274. People study folklore. All cultures have their myths and legends. Yeah, exactly. Like, it's an orange man's reaction. Well, you know, I'm not saying everything in what was it called in Church of Ireland and England is wrong. I'm just saying I'm a Roman Catholic, you know. But like, the interpretation changes like all the time. But neither one might turn around to saying, hey, look, I'm a professional at the Bible, you know, because that's all my field of expertise. I'm just talking shite in a way, giving my interpretation. This is why I'd love to do a live stream with, what was it called? Someone from the clergy, from the church, especially somebody who specializes in medieval history, you know, to do with the Roman Church of the medieval period, you know, because you can clearly see by the way I'm talking, I'm outside my field of expertise. I find it fascinating, but I am outside my field of expertise, you know. The priest just dipped his finger in holy water and then let the holy water dip. Holy water. It does go between, especially the whole thing of wine and stuff, you know. All it goes into the funny places, doesn't it? Bum, bum, bum. No wonders what known about. Just before my Uncle John passed away, he was complaining that he was always being tormented by little people, which I understand to be the leprechauns, the fairy folk, as we call it in Ireland. I think the term leprechauns doesn't pop up until 1850 with the Irish Americans. So the Irish Americans refer to them as leprechauns, from my understanding, and then the Irish in Ireland refer to them as the fairy folk. And I think that branch happens in 1850. Was the Inquisition in Ireland? You want to look into Ellis Kettler in, what was it called? Ellis Kettler is around 1320. And I think Ellis Kettler is only really the only victim there with the Inquisition. Yeah, Kilkenny. That's just why Kilkenny is so amazing, because Kilkenny has the Inquisition around 1320. I think. I'm trying to think now, is there any other examples of the Inquisition in Ireland? No. I think Spain is too busy trying to support Ireland rather than trying to, because the Irish are the Inquisition against the English, aren't they? Because if Desmond Fitzgerald or not so much the Silken Thomas Rebellion, but if Desmond's rebellion was a success around 1570, that would have been known as the Desmond Crusade, and that would have brought in a full Inquisition, you know. So if he had won, that would not be referred to as Desmond's Rebellion. that may have been referred to as Desmond's Crusade, because then you would have gotten, if Desmond was successful enough to give breathing space for more Italian mercenaries to make their way, and also Spanish mercenaries to make their way into Ireland. Then on top of that as well, that definitely would have brought the Inquisition into Ireland to cleanse out the Church of England and the Presbyterians out of it, you know. Bum, bum, bum. Maybe, I don't know. But now I'm just talking hypothetically. Bum, bum, bum. He turned water into wine. Yeah, you see, this is where it gets all funny there. Because it is in the Bible of Jesus turning water into wine, you know? So, yeah. There was the Scottish Inquisition, but it wasn't like the Spanish Inquisition. The Scottish Inquisition. Are you talking about the oh god, the one where they burned all the witches? But I wouldn't call that a Scottish Inquisition because it's nothing to do with the Roman Church. Remember, the Roman Church didn't believe in witches. Christ has risen. Bum, bum, bum. I agree, but wanted to know if Ireland ever formed the Roman Catholic churches. The states are. Oh, that's fascinating. But that is a fun fact. Desmond's Crusade. Yeah, if he had been successful, it definitely would have been referred to as the old Desmond Crusade, rather than Desmond's Rebellion. You know, I think Desmond's Rebellion is kind of the English giving their spin to it. You know, and because like the Desmond Fitzgeralds, their territory was signed off from the King of France, because the IRA at one point wanted to get rid of the Desmond Fitzgeralds during the, what was it called? The Irish, what was it called? The Irish War of Independence. So during the Irish War of Independence, a bunch of random men knocked at the door of Desmond, and they were going to drag him out and give him the old. But he was like, "Oh no, I'm not an English lord. I'm a French lord." And he ran into the back, and he got a signed paper from the King of France saying that his lands in Ireland were given to him from the King of France. And it confused the raw men, the IRA. So they were just very confused, and they left his door. So even the fact of referring to Desmond as a rebel is funny, especially when his lands could have been recognized by the papacy anyway, because those lands were, and even the title of King of Ireland wasn't recognized by the papacy. So, it seems to recall. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what his interpretation of, because I think limbo and purgatory and stuff. I don't agree with any of it. I don't think it's good for the mind of a woman. Like, because if you've just had a child, or even a husband, for example, that wouldn't be good for my mind. You know, if I had a child that passed away from stillbirth or anything to do with that, and the idea of my child running around in purgatory or limbo, it's not a healthy, you know, wouldn't be healthy for my mind, and it's definitely something I don't really believe in, especially when it's not even in the Bible. You know. The rat of the Inquisition, it sure would. Well, they tried to bring in the Inquisition just for them, didn't they, with the Holy Roman Empire and the 30 Years' War and stuff. The new Pope, what new Pope? There was a new Pope elected? I don't think so. Catholics haven't had a Pope since 1958. 1958? What? I have to go. See you in the see you, bye. Take good care now. Be safe. You guys think of another questionnaire, and while you guys are thinking of another question, I'm going to get myself another drink. Just 1 second, I'll pop around there. Give me another questionnaire, and I'll get myself another drink there. What? No questions? We have no doctor. Do you guys not have no questions for me? No, we're around out of questions. Ask Philip. And I have no clue how to get the Instagram linked onto this because that's acting up. Although I'm pretty sure I did. I go tap on that again. Maybe if I just type this in first. Boom, and paste. Save. She's loading something. Why don't I even know? Maybe if I click this, paste, save. Oh, sending data. Or maybe I did fix it. I got it working. I finally got it working. There we go. Go live. Oh, now I'm live on. I finally got it going actually. Right. Right. I don't understand what purgatory is. Maybe I don't understand your interpretation of what is purgatory. Because there isn't just one interpretation of what is purgatory. It depends on what your interpretation. Because it's all made up anyway, you know. Let's be honest. Like the Bible only says heaven and hell. Like where would your soul be trapped? Where is it lost? You know, it's in a form of purgatory. You know. Like that, it doesn't even make sense. Like when you look into the doctorate around the 16th century, especially when they're trying to suppress a lot of this stuff, you know, the whole idea of your soul being just, you know, lost when it's property of God, you know, whoa. Like, don't get me wrong, though I think there is probably some form of purgatory, perhaps, but you know, the way the church preaches that your soul is the property of God, you know, and it does make sense for him to punish it if you're going off doing daft things and your spiritual energies, you know, proper negative thing like a proper psycho or something. But even on top of that, there are people who have antisocial behavior, as they call it now, and they're all good Christians and they love being a Christian because it literally tells them in black and white, this is good and this is bad. Because a lot of people who suffer from antisocial behavior, when you actually listen to them, one of the biggest problems they have is they cannot identify what is good and what is bad deemed by society because people are so random, but they have a feeling, oh, I feel as though, because of my parents, this is a good thing to do and this is a bad thing to do. But if somebody has antisocial behavior, they find it very difficult to be able to tell this is good, this is bad. And I remember, what was it, 2 months ago now, I was talking to a Roman Catholic who loved, he suffered from antisocial behavior. And he loved the Roman Catholic Church because it literally tells him in the Bible, with the aid of a priest, what is good and what is bad. And there's no if and buts, you know, for him. Did Ireland take part in the Northern Crusades? The ones with the Teutonic Knights. Just so I can make it easier, actually, I might put a map. How is it? How do you? This is a quite good map. I'll use this map. Save. So here. Replace this one. Replace. There we go. The Crusades. So you're asking, did the Irish take part? Were they in the Teutonic Knights? Because there is English who are Teutonic Knights. But the problem is, when the Irish take part in the Crusades in both Jerusalem and also in with the Teutonic Knights and stuff, is that the I suppose other people are the they brand the Irish are as are because they've never met an Irish person before, so they don't know what the Irish look like. And so a lot of the time, when it comes down to the Crusades that happen in Jerusalem, a lot of the time the Irish get branded as Franks, as French people. So when they rock up in Jerusalem or Egypt or any of those places and they're with the Crusaders, Egyptians, Palestinians, Syrians, Saracens, and various other groups of people brand them as French people because they don't know what Irish people look like. They don't know what English people look like. So they're just like, well, they're the Franks, you know? So it's very, very difficult to tell both the Gaelic and the Anglo-Irish, the Normans, tell which one's which because the Anglo, what was it called? The likes of the Egyptians, the Saracens, and various other groups just, brand them all as Franks, and that's that. And with the fighting, so you're saying, did the Irish go into the areas, the Prussian areas that are in white there, and fight with the Teutonic Knights against the likes of the Lithuanians, the Polish and stuff? It's in the realm of possibility that you would have had like Anglo-Irish Knights or Ritter, as they're called in literature and stuff, that perhaps did take part. There were probably branches of the Butlers, of Fitzgeralds and stuff. It's in the realm of possibility. But the problem is with that is that they would just be branded as English Knights because the Lithuanians and the Polish and the Danish and all those people, well, maybe not so much Danish, but yeah, we'll put them in as Danish because they're in that era. They can't tell the difference between English people and Irish people. They just can't tell the difference in them, what the difference between Irish Knights and English Knights and stuff. So they're just going to brand them all as English, It's just the annoyance of it. So it's in the realm of possibility that you would have had knights from the southeast of Ireland, the Anglo-Irish Knights or Norman Knights, if you want to call them that, Highburn or Norman Knights. It's in the realm of possibility that they could have joined the Teutonic Order and stuff and gone over to the Prussian area there in white. But the problem is that they would have just been branded as English because what was it called? The Danish, Lithuanians, and the various other groups wouldn't have been able to tell the difference. Okay, what else do we have in here? See when I see you, Paul. And I'm just skipping around here with these answers. So, Philip, the Irish swords. What is your personal favorite? I'm very biased towards the one that pops up in everyone's favorite, by the way, the Irish ring sword that pops up in the 16th century. So I'm completely in love and have been in love for quite some time with the Irish ring sword that pops up in the 16th century. There's also another one here. I don't know if we have this exact find, and then some people say it's not real and stuff. Actually, I'll just put up Irish ring sword. Let's see what pops up. But there is a gallow glass ring sword, and I've always been wondering about that one, although people think it's a complete exaggeration. Let's see. Dave Swift has a very good one. Because Dave Swift has a more authentic version of it. If I can find his ring swords. There's also the old claymores and stuff as well, which always looks really good. Do you know what? I'll just actually... Long sword. This one's more fantasy. There's an Irish one done by Albia, which looks very fantasy-ish. Let me just... I always find this one's very kind of... what's it called? Well, ultimately, as long as you're a grand old person and you ask God to forgive your sins in your last moment of your life, and you have that, last meeting with God and stuff before you go off to the other realm. Anyone could be saved at that last moment. But if you're around, like, God's not fool. Like, if you're talking about from the perspective of a Roman Christian, if you think to yourself, oh, well, I can literally spend my life taking the piss, and then at that last moment, I can still go to heaven. No, 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 no. You get a full review, So it's not even a fact of, you had that moment of madness, and then you decided, you're going to end it all. Will you instantly go and burn down below? You probably won't, because you do have that moment, with your creator, allegedly, according to Roman Christians, that could save everything in the end, but that's down to God, not you. I'm giving Catholic meaning. Purgatory isn't made up. You must be orange. Sure, whatever, Boyle. Um, Limbo was just for the babies, I think. I believe it's gone now. Yeah, see, that's what I mean. Like, they were preaching that stuff when I was a wee baba. What was it? Not even a wee baba. Yeah, a wee baba. They still had the whole limbo thing, and they slowly seeped away. And even at church these days, I haven't heard a single thing of purgatory. And when I ask about purgatory, it's a case of, well, your soul belongs to God. Why would it just wander around freely, Purgatory is a state of purification. I'm not mistaken. Yeah, you see, I don't specialize in all that kind of stuff. I know there's a few people in the comment section that think they're fully specializing in that kind of stuff, but I don't specialize in that kind of stuff. So I'd love to get somebody in who specializes in that kind of stuff, who actually is qualified, by the way. Isn't the Irish kit different from the English during the Crusades? Not that I know of. Unless, obviously, cavalry is different. The Irish don't have cavalry, but I've never come across any source pointing out to a different form. Like, I don't even know where you would type in Irish Crusaders. They're just non-existent. The reason why we do have kit that is up to date with the Norway Crusaders, was it Robert of Normandy, who takes on a lot of Norse Gaelic mercenaries into his crusade and stuff, and pretty much are the bastard sons of Gaul Gael and stuff and other Gaelic, is because the fact that the Irish, under like Tundle's vision and what was it, the loose chess pieces and stuff, highlight the fact that the Irish are updated to warfare to do with Europe. Now, don't get me wrong, the Normans and a lot of the Franks are still more still have the advantage when it comes down to warfare. And it's not just they have the advantage over the Irish, they also have the advantage over the likes of the Anglo-Saxons, Scottish, Byzantine Empire, and a good chunk of Jerusalem because of their advanced cavalry charge. So it's more or less their saddle and various sort of bits and bobs like that that gives them the ability to do that cavalry charge, that gives them a massive advantage. Like, I'm covering the Norman invasion of Ireland right now with my classes on Patreon, and in those classes, it is a case of, cavalry charge, cavalry charge, cavalry charge, that gives the Normans constant advantage, So when it comes down to what differences did the Irish have that were in both the Norwegian Crusade and what differences they would have had within Robert of Normandy's First Crusade, I don't think the Irish would have been massively different to the Normans, to be quite honest with you, except for the fact they didn't have cavalry. They would have more or less kept to the likes of the Dane axes, spears, stuff like that, rather than keeping to more of the cavalry charges that the Norman knights specialize in. Yes. Yeah, that's pretty much, it's one of my favorite. That one there is kind of more on the, if I could change the pommel and the hand, not so much the pommel itself, but the handguard with the hand part of it, if I could change that to be more authentic, I definitely would, because that green is sort of funny, I think. And also obviously change, God, that word is gone completely over my head now. Where you place the sword, change that one to be more authentic. There is actually a better version. If I find a Kern Warrior. Let me see if I can find a better version of. Although that one's. Let me see. I don't know if I could zoom in on this one. Because there's actually a fringe on his one, but I don't know if you could see that. Images. Change it to this one. If you look at his one there, there's actually a fringe in it, and it helps pull it on and off. That's the purpose of the fringe, allegedly. But it's, from what I understand, it's unique to the Irish to have a fringe. Is there any reason why retained? Well, that's more the field of expertise. If we're looking at this question here, that's more into the field of expertise to do with Rambling Kern. So Rambling Kern, if you jump over to my channel there, you have the Rambling Kern who actually specializes more in that one, because that's definitely outside my field of expertise. But the Rambling Kern, yeah, he definitely would have an answer for that one. That's definitely in his bracket of field of expertise. So if you jump onto my channel and scroll down to the very bottom, you can find the Rambling Kern, and from there he could definitely answer that one for you. Boom. Oh my god, now that's a whole load of can. It depends on your interpretation of the Book of Invasions, where the Irish allegedly originated from Egypt and then made their way from Egypt, kind of through North Africa over to the Iberian Peninsula, modern day Spain, and then from Spain over to Ireland. And that's why the Irish today claim that they are related to the Spanish, although you do actually find DNA with the likes of the, who is it again? The Northern, one second, I have a map for this. Celtic, there we go. Galatia. I'll just put up the map. Replace images. I should have done myself a favor. You know, I'll do next time. Put this all into the one folder instead of letting it gone all over my place. But yeah, there's still a link today between the Spanish here in the north and then going up to Brittany and then into Ireland. Now, Brittany, Wales, and yeah, pretty much Brittany and Wales and Cornwall at this point, they're a part of one Celtic identity, and I think it's P Celtic. 1 second. I'm sure it's P Celtic. Give us a second there. P Celtic versus Q Celtic. Oh shit, wrong one. Sorry. Q Celtic. Right. Actually, there was a better image there. Aha, there we go. And you know what? I'll keep it the way it is. I'll just read this out. Right. So P Celtic is Wales and Cornwall, right? And Brittany. So if we look at Brittany in France, Cornwall, which is that little dippy thing out of England. I'm going to get in trouble now with people. And then you've got Wales here. They're all a part of one family of languages called the P Celtic. And their DNA is similar to each other. And then the Q Celtic is everybody from Scotland, Isle of Man, Ireland itself. And then if you go over to the northern Spanish area here, you also have the Q Celtic family as well. Okay. And they're all massively related. And then there is a whole theory right now that they were a part of one group. We don't know if it's an empire or what, but there seems to be some kind of Celtic Iberian link going on in the Bronze Age. But of course, way more study and stuff needs to go into that one. Plus, it's way out my field of expertise, although I do find it super interesting. So if you're looking for more information to do with the Irish being descended to like Noah and all that sort of stuff, look into the Book of Invasions, because the Book of Invasions is pretty much the Irish writing themselves into the Bible. And you do have that link all the way up to the Bronze Age and the Malaysians and all that kind of stuff. So it's in the realm of possibility, especially with DNA and stuff, but I don't know. So opening up a whole can of worms is way out there. I'm just being playful about calling you an orange man. Get out. And when the Irish were traveling with Eric the Red, you're talking about the Norse Gaelic, the men of Dublin, the men of Waterford, and the men of Cork. Bring this on actually. So you are talking about when the Irish were traveling with Eric the Red, which would be the men of Dublin, Cork, Waterford, and Limerick. Would they have had gone to populate and colonize? It's an interesting one, this one, because of the fact that we do actually have. So, if you read the sources to do with Olaf the Peacock, which pops up in Icelandic sagas, he doesn't pop up in Irish sagas or Irish stories or anything. Especially because we are missing the Dublin sagas and the Brian Bruce saga. They're both missing. So it'd be those two sagas that would have the Hiberno-Scandinavian stories and stuff like that, and literature to do with that period, but they're missing. We do have the Icelandic sagas. And in the Icelandic sagas, it does talk about Olaf the Peacock. And Olaf the Peacock, his mother, can't remember specifically her name, but she was a daughter of the Enel. She was a princess of the Enel, allegedly, supposedly. She's one of those princesses anyway. The problem is that you're dealing with a translation from the Icelandic sagas. So it's an understanding of Old Irish into Norse, and then from Norse Icelandic, then going another 100, 200 years later. So trying to understand the language is quite difficult. But basically, on what I'm saying is that allegedly, Olaf the Peacock, his mother, was allegedly a princess of the Enel, which was the main monarchy of Ireland at the time, the main royal family of Ireland at the time. So Olaf the Peacock, even as a child, his mother has kind of Hiberno, kind of Enel. They're pretty much an Enel fashion, but they're kind of more like a Hiberno Scandinavian fashion. So people notice that it's like unique. He's wearing unique clothes to the Icelanders, but it's not too alien to the Icelanders because it's like Hiberno Scandinavian fashion. It is the fashion. It's fashionable fashion of the Enel of the 10th century. So he's not dressed like Irish people of the Bronze Age or of the Iron Age. He's dressed as Irish people fashionably were dressed in the 10th century. So they were dressed in Hiberno Scandinavian fashion. And he's dressed really fancy because what happens is that at first, when his mother is sold into his mother got captured in the 10th century and she got sold up to the Icelanders. And wait. She got sold over to the Norwegians in Norway first. And the Norwegians of Norway, they don't know who she is because she's not talking. She's pretending to be deaf and blind. And they believe that she is deaf and blind. Deaf and can't speak because she has no tongue. She's playing. She's role-playing that she is. And the Norwegians sort of buy it. But they know she's important when they buy her because she's dressed as a noblewoman in like really fashionable stuff. Because Ireland at the time was in an economic golden age. So she's dressed in Chinese silk, but of the Hibernian fashion in Ireland. Scandinavian fashion in Ireland, which is the latest fashion in Ireland. So really, really, really important because when they buy her, she doesn't speak and she pretends she can. And so they sell her. They get an Icelandic man who eventually, manages to buy her and brings her up to Iceland, gets her pregnant, and their child ends up being Olaf the Peacock because one day when he was a child, they not only does she dress him with the clothes that she has because she comes with stuff as well, like a sword. Sorry, not a sword, but like a dagger and various other bits and bobs. And so one day she's there with her child. Her child is starting to grow at this point, and he's about 5 years of age. And she doesn't talk to. She gets caught, by the way, talking to the child, and she's not talking to the child in Norse. She's talking to the child in Old Irish at the time, just Irish, right? And she gets caught out, and she can speak in Norse because she's educated. And she tells the Norsemen that she's in fact a princess, And that causes, because at the time she's meant to be a low status slave, this causes a huge argument between the main wife of that family and this princess. And it gets into a physical violence. And so what happens is that the man who owns this slave, he's a landlord. He gives her, he just outright, instead of causing problems and stuff, he just outright just gives her that land and just says, you can just live there, okay? So she gets her child all off the peacock, and the two of them live on that land. And then when she keeps telling all of the peacock, look, if you want to make actual real money, go to Ireland. And she's not the first one. There's other tales as well in the Icelandic saga that tells people the money is in Dublin, which it is. Ireland at the time, especially Dublin, is in the middle of an economic golden age. And so what happens is that a lot of Icelandics and the Norwegians tell their children, hey, go to Dublin and make money. And she tells her child as well, go to Dublin, go make money. And so eventually he does go to Dublin, and he doesn't go to Dublin, sorry, he goes to the north of Ireland, the tippity top of Ireland. And there he finds I am assuming it's not in the literature, but I'm assuming he must have found the Kennel Owen. And I'm assuming he's related to the Kennel Owen, because the Kennel Owen was at war with Dublin at the time. And they do lose like battles like the Battle of Isle Bridge and stuff against the men of Dublin. Now it's complicated. The men of Dublin isn't at war with everyone. You know, they're involved with the clan wars, and they're involved in the politics of Ireland. So one moment they're fighting against the Kennel Owen, next season they'll be fighting against someone else, but they'll be also allied with someone else, and they'll be like doing fosterage and marriage alliances and adopting their children. So it's complicated. It's not a case of, oh, the men of Dublin, the Vikings are fighting everyone in Ireland. No, they're part of the politics in Ireland. And when a foreigner comes in to invade, they all come together to fight the foreigner, okay? Like the Norwegians. So there is actually invasions by, for example, Halfdan Ragnarsson invades Ireland around, I think it's around 870, 860-ish. Halfdan Ragnarsson invades Ireland, and Brodeur Eamer calls on his allies of the Eanale. Brodeur Eamer at the time is king of Dublin, and he gets his allies of the Eanale to come and help him. And it turns into this huge battle between the men of Ireland and Halfdan Ragnarsson and the men of Danelaw in England, who are the kind of Anglo-Vikings-ish, but they're kind of made up of Norwegians and Danes as well. But regardless, it's complicated is what I'm trying to say. So it's not a case of black and white. But regardless, before he even goes to Ireland, by the way, he stops off in Norway, and he puts together a war band made up of Icelanders and Norwegians. And then he goes to Ireland, does Olaf the Peacock does. And then when Olaf the Peacock arrives in the north of Ireland, he then, I'm assuming he meets up with the Kennel Owen, which is a Tuat group, a kind of king group that with their fort and stuff in the north of Ireland. He meets up there. At first, they don't know who he is, so they actually attack his war band at first, throwing javelins and darts at them. But then he screams in Old Irish, and he tells them to stop and this and that. And then when straight away, because they hear Old Irish coming out of this war band, they stop what they're doing. They stop throwing javelins and darts at them. And Olaf the Peacock then announces, I am Olaf the Peacock. I am, son to the daughter. He announces who his mother is. So he says, he is son of so-and-so, who is the daughter of the Rivoic of the Eanale, in my interpretation, okay? Because in the source to do with the Icelandic sagas, it says King of Ireland, but there is no King of Ireland. But the closest version we have is Rivoic of the Confederation of the Eanale. And when I say Confederation, that's also a modern word as well. I'm basically saying this is the coming together of a whole load of clans, right? And the person at the very top of it is kind of like the High King of Ireland, which would be in its original source, Rivoic. And so when he announces this stuff, they go and get the king of the Northern Eanale, and he comes down to talk to them. And in that, he's like announcing and returning his son. His grandson comes in, and he recognizes his grandson, by the way, because of the jewelry he has is the jewelry of the Eanale, and also his like scabbards and belts and all that kind of stuff is that sort of stuff. And so what this story is basically saying is that there is, what I'm basically ultimately saying is that there is actually a difference between the way that you have kind of Irish Vikings, the Hiberno-Scandinavians, the way they dress, even in the literature, is different to the Icelanders. So they recognize this. And also, we also know this because of the amount of archaeological finds. So like Irish brooches, so the Irish Vikings in particular have brooches and stuff, and their brooches are different to Norse and Icelandic brooches. So they can tell the difference between themselves. And so ultimately what I'm saying here, this is a long ass way of saying it, is that when you go over to Vinland, we can actually tell the difference. And we found brooches of both Norse and Icelandic brooches, which is kind of just Norse brooches, right? And we've also found Hiberno-Scandinavian brooches. So there is Hiberno-Scandinavians that came up with the Norse and over to Iceland and also over to Vinland, America as well. So it's very, very mixed and matched, you know. But did they purposely go up to like there is, if you read Nile Saga, you do have Hiberno-Scandinavians, Irish Vikings that live in Iceland, and they're like, if you read Nile Saga, there is differences, but it's very complicated. It's mixed match. Like, did they go up to Greenland and Finland to purposely? We know they're up there, but if they're colonizing the way the Norse are colonizing, I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't even know if they have land. There's a possibility they had land up there, so I don't know. I don't know, but they're definitely going up there with the Norse. Basically, that was a long ass way of saying that. Especially since, my opinion, it would be more Anglo-Norman, affected by people. I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, so we do actually from what was it, Robert of Normandy. It's in the realm of possibility because of the politics that was happening in Ireland, not just in Ireland at the time, but also throughout Europe as well, is that you have a whole load of basically just unwanted, because in the early medieval period, you would basically had war bands running around the place. But when you go into the high Middle Ages, you're kind of going into the period of knights and peasants. And a lot of knights are supposed to have land, like they're supposed to be barons and stuff. But the problem is then you end up with extra knights going around the place, which did have a place back in the early medieval period when you're just dealing with, you know, war bands and warriors and the war bands and stuff. But going into the high Middle Ages, when these people are now supposed to be knights, but they're knights with no land, they're kind of just unwanted people that, you know, they don't want them to be behaving like war bands, so they're sending them off in crusade. So you see a good indication and hint of that with the Norse Gaelic. So the Norse Gaelic and Gaelic that are kind of hanging around the Norse Gaelic, they kind of become the unwanted. So there is, especially with the connections with Normandy. So the Normans in Normandy have a lot of connections with Dublin, Waterford, and Cork at the time. So it's definitely in the realm of possibility. And it is hinted in the literature that they did go on crusade with them. But we also have Crusader in Dublin. 1 second. We do have Crusaders dated to that era. Found in Dublin. Boom, boom, there we go. Which people in Dublin seem to be addicted to burning and destroying for some strange reason. But we do actually have graves of Crusaders from the First Crusade in Dublin. Bam, 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 bam. If I can just, there we go. So that's the burial of, I can't remember if it's a Crusader or Crusaders. But there you go. They're up in Dublin, just behind the forecourts. There's a church there, and inside you have I can't remember if it's a Crusader or Crusaders, but there are Crusaders buried in Dublin that returned back from the First Crusade. And also around the period of the First Crusade, you also have the Norwegian Crusade as well, which stopped off and collected Norse Gaelic and the Gaelic that were between that whole kind of Irish sea world, that were just basically unwanted bastards that were kind of, it's the end of the Viking Age. There's no need to have these kind of war bands running around the place. So they're kind of just hinted to go off in crusade, you know. So I wouldn't say they're up to the numbers of the Normans in Normandy or the Norwegian Crusade and stuff, but they kind of blur in with the Norse and the Franks, you know? And especially if you've read Tundle's Vision or looked at the Lewis chess pieces, you can see how much they would have just easily blurred in there. Like, because you have to remember, to when we go over to places like, for example, Jerusalem or Egypt, we're just white people. Like I live out in Asia, and the amount of times people just turn around and call me American, you know, it happens all the time. You know, they're not going to turn around and just be like, "Oh, I can clearly identify you're from the land of Ireland because you're, you know, I don't know." They're just going to look, see a white guy, and just go, "Oh well, he's just another white guy that's Norse, Frankish, or American." In my case, like, bum, bum, bum. Okay, what else do we have in here? Anyone can become a saint. Yeah, depends. I think the Roman Christians are kind of strict. I know Celtic Christians, they had a stage or a stage around the what was that, the sixth, seventh, and eighth century, where a lot of people were saints. There were so many saints all over Ireland, but not a single one of them, by the way, are recognized by the papacy. The papacy, in fact, hasn't even recognized Saint Bridget of Ireland as a saint yet. We are pushing for her to be a saint, by the way, but she hasn't been recognized as a saint yet by the Roman Church. She still. This is where it's funny because there's still a lot of people in Ireland recognize her as a saint. So funny. So no shock cavalry from the Irish. How would they conduct defensive formations to observe and survive Knights Cavalry charges? So the Knight Cavalry charge of the High Middle Ages is definitely different to the Knight Cavalry charge of the late medieval period. So could we? Let me see if I can find High Medieval Knight versus late medieval Knight, because the two cavalry charges are different, so there's different tactics to do with it. I can't find the bloody high or late, but anyway, high medieval period knights are kind of more just in riveted mail and a nice little helmet and stuff. Let me see. Let's give it this one, right? So to defend against this sort of charge, you would go into a kind of a spike formation of spears, and that's because that's what they did in the High Middle Ages when they brought in the Gallo Glass mercenaries and stuff. Is that they would most likely have the Clí-Éire, the King's Warband, go into a defensive spear formation to kind of somewhat hold them at bay and stop a full charge into their lines. And then from there, they would use the Gallo Glass and their axes to cut down and butcher the knight. And that's why Gallo Glass became super effective during the High Middle Ages around 1260, during the Brian O'Neill's Revolt and the Tamaud Wars. Then, so that's the defense against them. And then when we go into the late medieval period, late medieval knight, where knights are pretty much at that point battering rams, like they're just something else. 1 second, English Gothic knight. So around 1399, actually, I'll just put in art. Okay, maybe not. Oh, maybe I have it over here. Give us 1 quick second there. Because I actually have a picture of this defense. There we go. Oh, there we go. That's perfect. So this is actually Mark Kavanagh. And he gives a very good example of what the defense is around 1370 to 1399, where you start to see this kind of warfare, more full-plated armor warfare come into Ireland, right? And this picture is actually brilliant. So one thing would have done, instead of trying to hold the line formation, is, and you can kind of start to see this in the late, in the Scottish War of Independence as well, and even in the High Middle Ages, they were also doing this tactic as well. Did that load up properly? Where did she go? 1 second, actually. Let's save her somewhere else. try to get a better picture, actually. 1 second. Yeah, that's a far better picture. Oh, yeah, found it. Okay, so I went to downloads, not my easy to find folder. Right, so I replaced that one, and I'll put in this image instead. Bum, 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 bum. There we go. So if you look at this photo here, what you can see is that the knights are coming in, right? And just as the knights in this one, Arkmakmore Covenant is actually just trying to prod and poke him to charge him. But the main defense here, and it works so well in 1399, and even battles around that whole Richard II's invasion of Ireland from 1370 to 1399. In that entire campaign, this tactic works again and again and again. And that is to get the Hobbler horse to come over, chuck in those javelins into the full plate armor knights, the late medieval knights and stuff, drag them in and just keep hurling. Do not hold formations. Do not hold formations of Gallowglass or Kern. The land is rough. Like even in this photo here, the land is tough and rough. You don't have to worry about holding line formations and stuff in that territory and stuff. Like the Kerns have huge advantages, and just light infantry in general. Like a lot of people are so quick to turn around and say, oh God, how do you get light infantry, Kerns, to beat full plate knights? Just harass them. Don't commit to line formations. Even when you get into line formations, do it in rough terrain. Look at that. You know, the rivers are in the way, especially when they have slippery soles. This is before rubber soles get sticky and able to stick to the ground where you're walking. The leather soles that they have in this period, very, very, very slippery, which gives the Gallowglass and Kern huge advantages, especially if they're going barefoot. Like if you look at here, Arkmakmore Covenant, he has his helmet. He has his riveted mail there. So clearly he'd be able to buy shoes. He doesn't have shoes on. Why? Because he'd slip and fall. He's dealing with them in tough terrain. And that's the greatest way. And it works so well in 1399. Like they beat Richard II. Richard II's invasion, English invasion in 1399 is a complete failure because of the way the Arkmakmore Covenant is continuously harassing them, you know? So that's how you deal with cavalry charge, both in the High Middle Ages and the late medieval in Ireland. Now, does it always work? No. There are plenty of situations where, if you take, for example, the Wars of the Roses in the last stages, the Battle of Stokefield and stuff, you know, the Kerns are a complete and utter disaster in that entire battle and stuff, you know. Again and again and again during the Battle of Stokefield alone, the Kerns are put in positions that they can't hold the line. You know, it's the German mercenaries. They're the greatest. Like the Irish, the Fitzgeralds hire German mercenaries for the Battle of Stokefield, which was an Irish invasion into England. One of the last battles of the Wars of the Roses. The Fitzgeralds hire German mercenaries, and they're the only ones that hold the line. The Irish Kerns, the light infantry, just well out. You know, they're just not in their standard. And I think it's because the English terrain just does not agree with the Irish Kerns compared to when they're in Ireland and they're dealing with this rough terrain where the Irish have those advantages in there, you know. Slings and javelins, yeah, very, very effective. Not very effective. We do have, like, if you're talking about sling, like the javelins and darts that the Kerns are using on the Hobbler horses, they're effective throughout the entirety, all the way up to the early modern period. There's references of them penetrating the mail and armor. So they do, according to the literature, they do seem to be effective. Now, on saying that, I would like to see more experimental archaeology done to see if they actually are effective darts and javelins against full plate armor and stuff, and riveted mail. Yeah, so Age of Empires 2. Oh, Jesus Christ. There's a lot of problems with that one. Has many transforms, chat about Celts rework and what factions they should use. Yeah, but I talked to a lot of the Age of Empires 2 community and stuff, and they don't have a clue about all that kind of stuff, because Celtic civilization, the interpretation that's in Age of Empires 2 is very much a Celtic interpretation from 300 AD. You know, medieval period happens from around 410 all the way up to 1603. So at least 100 years away from the interpretation that's even in Age of Empires 2. Because by the time you even start the medieval period, the Irish are in the Hiberno-Roman fashion, and this is backed up by with tons of recent archaeological finds in Ireland that we're constantly digging up. They're dated to 410 over and over and over and over again. We're not finding these early Celtic finds from around 90 AD, which is the Latin culture in Ireland, the insular Latin culture in Ireland, which is dated to around 100 BC to around 300 AD. We're not finding these finds at the start of the medieval period. We're finding the Hiberno-Roman finds in Ireland, you know. So the Irish are updated by the time you get into 410, and they would be because now they're invading and taking over parts of Roman Britain, especially Wales and stuff, against the Roman Britons, because Rome itself has pulled out by 410. And also on top of that, they're also pushing in and taking territory in Scotland as well. So of course the Irish at that point are updated, but none of this is reflected in Age of Empires 2, because I would say if you're going to do the Irish, give them Gaelic culture, you know, that dominates Ireland from, you know, 410 all the way to 1603, and bring in, you know, for example, I'm not saying get rid of the Celts, because, you know, you have the warriors and stuff, and you can always do multiplayer where you have Celtic culture with the Gaelic culture, but balance out, add in Gallowglass, put in, you know, civilization wise, because it's civilized orientated, it's not country orientated or realm orientated. What you do is you add in Gaelic culture into Age of Empires 2, and then you give them Gallowglass, and that would balance. If you were to play multiplayer, then you'd have that balance of wood raiders, as they call them, which could be your, you know, Kerns and stuff, and then you'd also have the Gallowglass in there, you know. I don't know. That's just my interpretation. I was thinking heavy infantry and pike. Pike is a funny word, because then you're going into the whole argument of spears to pikes. At what point do you call it a spear or pike? Because of the rough terrain and trees and stuff, the Irish favor spears, especially when you're moving in between the what was it called, the forestry and stuff, because the Irish love going between the forests and stuff, so you're dealing with more spears. But in the southeast of the island of Ireland, you do see more kind of conventional fighting with pikes and stuff. So around the Desmond's Rebellion in the 16th century, if you look at the book of Kerns and Gallowglass, if you guys are just jumping on now, I'll actually show you that book. You do have references to Gallowglass having pikes rather than spears. But because of the rough terrain in Ireland, you see more spears than pikes, especially to do with the Gallowglass. Right. The Irish that would have been resisting the Normans, the Gaelic, would they not have had heavy armors to do heavy infantry pike? Heavy armors. They had, if you're talking about riveted mail and stuff, the Irish had riveted mail. So we do have riveted mail. This is much later on. Let me actually find you. We do actually have lots of effigies with, because the effigies at the time show Irish people the Gallowglass and the Clee Era and the Airy? Yeah. In riveted mail. And also on top of that as well, O'Brien, his effigy has a great helm, so they're completely updated. The only disadvantage they have is against that cavalry charge. That cavalry charge that you see from the Hiberno-Normans of the 13th century gives the Normans at the start, well, the English at the start, a huge advantage. But what they do actually to counter that is they do actually get Norman mercenaries. So the Gaelic do get Norman mercenaries to counter that, and they also marry into Norman families. So Norman families give in their Ridra. So these Norman mercenaries become Ridra. So they become the Ridra of that period. But yeah, they also have pikes and riveted mail. If you look at effigies and stuff, let me see if I can find this. Iona effigies. If I type in this, there we go. Some very good ones here. Actually, that was a really good one. Where's this one? Ah, that's a really good one. So this is pretty much the kind of gallo glass of the 13th century. Not the gallo. You see, everyone, when they think of gallo glass, they think of the gallo glass of the 15th and 16th century. The effigy I'm showing you here is of gallo glass of the 13th century when the Normans first come in. And so you can see here that they have their spear and heater shield, and they're pretty much up to date to pretty much what the what was it called? The Normans, or English, if you want to refer to them, would have worn during it. Now, this one actually has a gammonson. So let me find one that actually has riveted mail. Bum, 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 bum. Which I end up not finding any. Right now, I see a lot of gammonson ones because, once again, this is a pretty good picture. Oh, there's a book on it. Ooh, I'm finding a lot of gems for different stuff. Why is it I do live streaming and I'm busy, and then I find dozens and dozens and dozens of gems for other topics, but I'm not finding what I want. If I actually look at O'Connor's grave, for example, 1 second. O'Connor effigy grave gallo glass. Yeah, his ones. If I find a really good one, yeah, that's a really, really good one. Kind of drawn funny, but let me see if I can find an even better one again. Yeah, actually, this might be the best one. I'm not finding the better ones. This is why you guys need to fly over to Ireland to take these photos. But just 1 moment. I show you guys riveted mail of the 13th century, which is your heavy armor or whatever of the 13th century, because this is before full plate armor. There we go. So if you look at this one, this is an effigy from O'Connor's grave. And in this, you can see gallo glass with riveted mail. Now, granted, in this one, they don't have their spears and heater shields. Instead, they just have their fancy dancy swords. But, you know what, they're high status and could easily get a heater shield and spear if they can get themselves riveted mail and a sword. And I believe there is some blood type connection with Spain. Yeah, there is a connection there between North Spain and Ireland for sure. Sounds like who wrote the Book of Invasions? Book of Invasions. Let me actually quickly look that one up. I know it's around. The one we have today is around the Book of Invasions. I found the picture on the Book of Invasion. Noah Gahara. When are you written? Well, the one we have today. They think it was influenced by an earlier text from the 5th century, but the surviving text we have today comes from 1339. So the surviving version, which I actually have a picture of it here if you want to have an old gawk, comes from 1339. But they believe because of the writing style that's in it, and also kind of not just the way it's written and stuff, but also the language used in it, that it originates from the 5th century. I debate that one though. 5th century is so early though. Book of Invasions. I just looked all that up, by the way. There you go. That's what it looks like. Dun, dun, dun. Saint Wayne. Let me actually go down to the bottom. Oh no, I was already at the bottom. I love that gallo glass holding the axe. Yeah, they were very quite good at the old axe, weren't they? As because a lot of them were related to, they were kind of in that connections of the Norse Gaelic world. A lot of people turn around and says, oh, they were, what was it? Scottish Vikings. Which was so out there and wrong, because the MacSweeneys weren't related. The MacSweeneys were part of the hybrid. What was it? The Norse Gaelic world, but they weren't North. They weren't Scandinavian whatsoever. There was no what was it called? Relation to the what's it called? I have to get rid of that one before I get into trouble. What was it called? What was it saying? God, the fecker completely blew my mind. I saw his comment there, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I agree or disagree with it. It's just that it would have gotten me into trouble, and I saw it pulled down. I now bloody lost my state of thinking. Let me actually quickly just go through the comments, and I will pick up what I was thinking again. Yeah, there was a whole system of Roman Catholic Church goes through, official recognized saint. Yeah, there was, wasn't there? That's why we've lost Saint Bridget for the time being. What I meant was anyone can change their ways, evil's good, and become a saint. Oh, yeah. I know what you mean. The way that most of the saints for Jesus became saints, all right. Richard II had to pay Art MacMurrough. Richard II himself didn't pay homage to Art MacMurrough Covenant because he was locked up and starving to death because of the English. And the English themselves in England didn't. But the cities of Ireland had to pay a black rent on homage to Art MacMurrough Covenant until he was poisoned in New Ross, most likely by the English. So the Irish cities, Dublin, had to pay the black rent to Art MacMurrough Covenant. So they had to submit to Art MacMurrough Covenant. The Mortimers were still in Dublin at that time. So Dublin was still in the administration of the Mortimer. Oh, wait, no. I take that back. It was under the administration of York-ish. And even on top of that, there was no one in there. Who was it again? There was somebody that took over the administration. I can't remember who it was. There was an English fellow that took over the administration after the death of Roger MacMurrough. Oh, sorry, after Richard II was booted out. And I cannot remember who it was. Let me go through your comments, and then I might look that up. I'll see your comments or say. But there is somebody who's in charge of the administration after Richard II is booted out, because Roger Mortimer is killed in the Battle of Killstown. So in the Battle of Killstown, Roger Mortimer is killed in that one. So he's not in charge of the administration. Richard II has to invade Ireland again in 1399, and he himself is beaten in the Wicklow Mountains against Art MacMurrough Covenant. And he goes back to England, where he is captured by Henry Bolingbroke and is starved to death. So Henry Bolingbroke steals the crown. But who takes over the administration of Dublin? I can't remember, but I do know it's an English fella, and he's forced to pay the black rent in submission to Art MacMurrough Covenant. So, but Dublin doesn't go under the administration of the Irish until the Wars of the Roses, when the Fitzgeralds not even at the end of the Wars of the Roses. It's around, actually. It's when James the Usurper Fitzgerald and what's his name, Seamus the White Butler take over Dublin. I think that's 1420. 1420, they get into disputes. Tolbert takes over the administration. That's it, because that's what starts the Tolbert Butler feud. The two boys. That's when the Irish take over the administration. That's it. Anyway, back into the comments. Ireland really seems to be a bridge into America. Why did they stop going to the Americas? Seems like the resources and trade ship. Norman invasion of Ireland. That's what happened. So we were connected because of the Viking trade routes to Vinland. And we were getting a whole load of wood and perhaps even trading with the Native Americans. However, and what's crazy is even up to the Wars of the Roses in around 1440, maybe even earlier than that. It's whenever Columbus comes over to Galway. Columbus does actually, by the way, he goes to Galway. You can look that up. But fishermen talk about how they can go all the way up to Iceland, and then from Iceland to it is Iceland, and then from Iceland over to Greenland, and then from Greenland they can make their way over to Vinland. And according to them, they're still doing it. They're hopping over. But of course, Columbus didn't believe that Vinland or America existed. He thought it was Russia, Mongolia, and China that we were going into. So he didn't even believe us. And what was it? St. Brendan's Voyage as well. St. Brendan's Voyage was very popular. And St. Brendan's Voyage talked about this new world, which we'd later call Vinland and stuff. And of course, at that period, Columbus and stuff didn't believe in any of that stuff. He believed it was Russia, China, and Mongolia. He didn't believe America existed in his lifetime. I'd have to go, glad. Right, where am I going? Really, before the last quarter of the 13th century, I would not really say anyone had heavy armor. Yeah, not until around. It goes into this blur thing around the 14th century, but it's not until around the 15th century. Like you can see there, like 1 second. In 1399, when you have the invasion, you can see that. What's that influence called again? But you can see that full plate armor there off the English on the left side that Art McMurray is going against. But it's not like the Irish didn't have full plate armor as well, because you have the likes of the Fitzgeralds and the Butlers who also had full plate armor. The thing is that the Butlers and the Fitzgeralds, they knew that, well, the Butler of that era, he's on the side of the English. This is before Seamus Butler takes over. But who was in charge? It is the Fitzgeralds are on the side of the Irish, because it's Garrod, the poet Fitzgerald, that's in charge. And he is pretending to be on the side of the English, but he's kind of, they brand him as wild Irish. And he kind of just does a whole load of mad stuff because he's allied to the O'Briens and stuff at the same time. But he can't fight the English directly anyway, because he's well outnumbered, I think pretty much outgunned by them. But he does have modern full plate armor from the 100 Years' War in France and stuff. So he is modernized, but he just can't fight them. And neither can any of the other Ridera, if there is Ridera, that have that sort of armor anyway, because the English are just wiping all of it. So the Gaelic tactic of using hobbler horses to go in there and throw their darts and javelins, that's going to be better regardless. Even if, you do have Ridera in Ireland that were serving in the 100 Years' War that do have modern armor for that period, they just wouldn't go against the English anyway, because they get battered, because they're well outnumbered. So the javelin technique is definitely best. The conical helmet, can you show me a replicant and how it would have been looked? Ooh, what? Which one are you talking about? The one on the Gallowglass? 1 second. Let me see if you're talking about the Gallowglass effigies of the 13th century. Give us a second one. The one that's on, what's his name's? O'Connor's grave. Gallowglass effigy. Let me see if I can just find a Gallowglass effigy, because, oh yeah, that's a way better one. What you're dealing with, really, like, is there a drawing version of these? Oh, this is a magnificent one. There you go. This one starts arguments and stuff, because people are like, oh, is this more later version and stuff? So some people argued that this may have been a later depiction. So give us a second there. Iona. Actually, no, I'll just switch over to. So maybe this would be a better version, because a lot of people do argue that perhaps this is a later. There we go. So maybe this one's much more accurate, and you can see that's a much more earlier version, from my understanding anyway. St. Brendan. I have the book on St. Brendan's Voyage. I have the book back in Ireland, but I do not have the book here in Japan. Remember, Richard II paid Art MacMurrough a yearly annual in 1395. Did he? I think Art MacMurrough was losing the campaign at that point, so I don't know about that one. When do you think that depiction is? Which one are we talking about? The Iona effigy or the O'Connor effigy? There's a conical helmet in a grave in Canada. Oh, really? Do you have a source for that? I'd love to see that right now, actually. That seems absolutely fascinating. Right, I will chill for you guys for another 2 minutes or so, and then I have to pop away and do stuff. Oh, geez, it's almost 1 o'clock. What? Right, I'll pop away in 2 minutes there. Ooh, by the way, guys, I am doing a class. I'm just literally on the very start of the Norman invasion of Ireland. I've done 2 previous classes on the Normans in general, but this weekend was it Sunday night for you guys. For Wayne, it's going to be what was it called? Monday morning, but Monday morning for Wayne because he's in Australia. But for the rest of you guys in America and Canada, it is going to be on Mexico if you're watching from Mexico. It will be Sunday night at, what was it called? I can't remember. It depends where in America you are, but just head over to my Patreon. If you go over to my Patreon, which you can click, if you click on my Irish Medieval page, go into my Patreon, and there, if you go up to the 20 quid one, or $20, whatever you want to call it, click on that one. It'll give you the times and everything for that one. And I want to say fly over. Actually, no, I'm running out of time. Anyway, if you guys are interested in the Norman invasion of Ireland and all that kind of stuff, lads, sign up for those classes over my Patreon. Other than that, guys, I'm literally on the very start of that Norman invasion of Ireland. So if you're interested in that, head over to my Patreon. Sign up for the 20 quid a month, which then gets you access for my classes. I do the recordings anyway, so even if you missed the class itself, you still have all those recordings and all the previous recordings from all the other months as well. Definitely go over, check that out, even for all nosy. Other than that, guys, thanks very much, and slán go Gaeilge.